And you can't even drive? I can. Are you stupid, eh? Are you a stupid fool? Well, why can't you drive then? You can't even drive! A bit grey today, isn't it?
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another Deepest Lore. I like to think D, the stream of the true elite. It's got, I reckon, about a quarter of the audience of the other two shows that I do, but that's kind of, I like it that way.
That's a good part.
And also I love the fact that if you look at the Bowie shows, there's been a declining curve.
I did notice that. That seems to happen with like any of the series. You know, yeah. they tend to drop off quite a lot.
Oh well, we're in real Bowie file hours now, because today we're going to be covering the Berlin trilogy. But before I get to that, I do have to mention promo code Scorcher, ladies and gentlemen. Scorcher.
Pow!
Where is it? Pow! Pow! It's the academic agency summer sale. Use the promo code Scorcher. 25% off all courses. Scorcher. Get it now. Scorcher. 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 Promo code Scorcher. 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 Buy it now. Do you know? I'm wondering if a single person in the audience gets all of my references in that particular.
I didn't even get all
the guy with his surfboard is on that show, that sitcom Game On from the 90s that I covered once on Deepest Lore. Which you can go back and read about.
Oh God. Oh yes.
The woman in front of the kind of woman that you see is from the Far Show. The Weather Woman is also from the Far Show. Obviously Tim Westwood is the Radio 1 rap show guy from the 90s. The wrestler that you see is Sting, the WCW, but back in his Surfer Sting days in the early 90s. Roland Rat is in there.
Roland Rat, yeah.
And I think there's a clip from Some Holiday by Cliff Richard. So I think that was all of them. Yes. The expense of my fucking holiday, and I have also bought a box of cigars, which I am hoping to expense on two grounds, right? If Her Majesty ever questions this, right, there's two grounds. One, I run the world famous cigar stream, a very well known cigar review show. But secondly, I reckon it's a marketing expense. The cigars are an important part of my brand image. What do you reckon? Do you think that's true?
Oh, they're going to screw you so bad.
Maybe I'll have to get an accountant and run that bastard.
Yeah, I think one day you're going to get done, mate. Oh dear, oh dear.
Do you think? I mean, I think that's allowable. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to. If anybody's like a tax expert, let me know if I can get away with the idea of.
You're down to begging the trucks for a tax expert.
I mean, it's a £650 box of cigars as an allowable tax expense. Do you reckon?
Are any of you autistic 20-year-old Americans a tax expert?
But it's important once you really get into cigars. You have to get a box eventually, and then you have to. They all talk about aging them, so like not smoking them for like 2 years and things like that. Well, you can't really do that buying them one by one, because you end up smoking them all.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, if I get a box of 25, I won't be able to smoke them all for a long time. So
I smoke cigars off and on for many years, and I've never aged. I'm I'm not.
Well,
I'm more of a work a day smoker because I
it,
just
they talk about it acquiring new complexities of flavor after like a year or so. So that's why well, I don't know because I haven't even.
you can
I've
report
never.
back. Yeah, you can be the definitive test whether it's true or not.
And anyway, also coming up this week, I think on Friday is the event. Last chance to get tickets is this week. I'll mention it tomorrow as well. Main event anywhere in the country. Also, I've actually written my paper now, and it's kind of a bit tricky, D, because a lot of the things I'm saying disagree strongly with a certain Curtis Yarvin who will be sitting there in the audience. So that should be interesting.
I think everyone's turned against him at this point. So.
Well, I'm working babyface, so but still, there is that. So yeah, the event is coming up. I'm starting to. I mean, I know I'll have a good time, D, but I just dread all social engagements. I don't know about you, but I have to psych myself up for them. And to make matters worse, Radlib is coming to stay at the lodge, which I'm even more nervous about.
Oh no!
Yeah, I know.
It's funny. Radlib is like, he's in the same age group as I am. He's like a couple of years older than me, a few years older than me, and yet I still have this weird, like, sort of. I get that nervous feeling when has around like someone else's father. It's just something.
Yeah.
There's something about Radlib that sort of frightens me. So
yeah, but also I may introduce Radlib to Mrs. AA and to AAA as well. He has that kind of, Whereas if it was just like, I don't know, pick any other random internet racist, maybe I wouldn't.
Well, I mean, he knows how to handle children, for goodness sake. So he's got 8 of them.
Yeah, and I'll just pick up this very quick super chat. What's a good cigar for a noob to start? Geekery, that depends on your budget, my friend. My favorite cigar is a Cuban called the Hoyo de Monterrey Epicure 2. That's a very, very good cigar to set you off on the right path, but it is about £30 a pop. So
yeah, don't start with that one. It's a very good cigar, but I wouldn't start with that.
You may want to start with what they call a cheap and cheerful cigar, something like an H. Upmann Majestic. That's £18.
Yeah, or you could go cheaper than that. I mean, I don't know. I'm much more of a plebeian than you because I tend to go for the £10 or less range. No, I do enjoy a good Cuban and such, but
But by the way, speaking of cigars, that is why I'm late today. By the way, because
what happened?
Well, there's this wonderful interview with Evelyn Waugh on this old show the BBC did called Face to Face, which is an amazing series. Not just the Waugh one. They speak to Dame Sitwell and many other people on there as well. Marvelous showcase for the gulf in quality of elites between the 1950s and now. To put it that way.
It becomes very apparent very quickly.
Yeah, but Evelyn Waugh during his interview smokes a cigar, a really fucking massive Churchill he smokes, and he during the interview he puts the cigar in his mouth, takes his hand off the cigar. So you can imagine he's holding the cigar in his mouth, and then he does a double puff without any hands, and then he takes it out again, and then he blows out the smoke. Well, as you can imagine, D, I've been trying to do that all week.
I do that all the time,
and I can't fucking do it.
Why is it so difficult?
So what happened is that I was trying to do the Evelyn Waugh double puff with no hands, and it fell. The cigar fell all over my shirt, all over the floor, all over fucking everything. So I had to I clean up the ash, clean up my clothes. So it took 10 minutes. So that's why I'm late.
Good Lord! I mean, I'll tell you that is not as bad as driving fast down the motorway and dropping a cigar between your legs in the car.
No, that's bad as well.
That's my experience. But no, it's not that difficult. And one thing I noticed about him was that he was maximalizing the cigar. So he was basically letting it go as long as he possibly could before it's just, but not letting it go out. and then taking a puff, and that is certainly
Oh,
a
it was
way to do it.
masterful
Yeah,
cigar technique. Yeah, once every couple of minutes, and it was still live. By the end, he didn't
yeah,
relight it or anything.
no,
Anyway, we may at some point do an evening more deeper slaw, somewhat complicated by the fact that I don't and won't read novels. But I'm kind of fascinated by him as a character, because during that interview, he's actually accused of being a fascist, which interested me.
yes, and
Anyone who's accused of being a fascist is
it's okay by
automatically interesting.
well, and he was
Anyways,
quite an acerbic character as well. I mean, he was very sharp.
yeah. Speaking of people who were once accused of being fascist, should we get on to David Bowie?
Get on David Bowie, yeah, of course.
Right, so we're entering what for me is my favorite era of Bowie, the Berlin trilogy. I have to ask you, D, is it your favorite era too?
Um, it's close. I would say that for me, it's a toss-up between the kind of nascent David Bowie of like hunky dory and this era. I mean, certainly in terms of kind of innovative music, this was it. So yes, but I've like many pretentious people, I love the Berlin album. So
Yeah, and you see, people are going to think that we, or I in particular, am really pretentious, because I have to say, I think if I was forced to do a ranking, I'm one of those people who'd probably put Low as number one.
wow,
Now, I remember when I was growing up that music hack twat journalists would
oh
always say things like, Low is an album that is much more admired than actually listened to, and things like that. And I'm like, no, it's awesome. What do you want about? And I'll tell you what I used to do. There was a pub in my hometown where we used to play pool, and it had a jukebox, right? It wasn't like an old jukebox. It was one that I think was loaded with CDs.
mm.
But basically they had a lot of albums, and for whatever reason, this particular jukebox had a copy of David Bowie's Low on it. So you can imagine what I used to do when I was 17 and up to mischief. I would literally go in and play songs from the second side of Low to subject the pub to Warsaw and
Yeah,
Art
Woodstock.
Decade.
Subterraneans.
Yeah, exactly. So I would just like bring down the mood of the pub by playing like second side of Low tracks.
Amazing.
Anyway, yes. Yeah, I mean, just before we get into it, would you go as high as that with these albums, or because at the end of this, I do want to do like an eventual ranking. Would you put them up there?
I would put them high. I don't know that I would put them at the absolute top, because I think that you have to consider them as a sort of a piece. I think alone it's very difficult. I mean, but the thing is, I listen to these records, thousands of times probably,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't read. I mean, I don't read. I make a conscious effort never to read music journalism, because I hate it so much. So I don't really know what people say very much about what people say about these. So like I said, I don't read the twat journalists. So for me, I always just listen to them because I like them. But I mean, I have a slightly slanted taste, and as we'll talk about, I had other reasons for kind of coming to these records as well, because of people who worked on them. So so I would certainly put them high, but I think in terms of, they're very I would say they're very cold choices. They're not the warm embrace you turn to if you need to be lifted up. Or
Yeah, that's why I like them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a distance there, which is part of the charm. So
yes. Also, I've just noticed that Low was number 2 in the UK record chart. That must be the most avant-garde record ever to hit number 2. I mean,
yeah, and Heroes as well. It did very well in the UK. I mean, on the charts, especially Low is especially interesting because Bowie and RCA did nothing to promote it. Literally nothing. Like they released Low, late because they didn't want to release it. And then Bowie went off and played keyboard for Iggy Pop on a tour for months and didn't do
Yes.
any promotion for Low, and yet it's still charted on the British charts. So that's quite
It,
amazing.
it even hit number 11 in the US charts, which is even more wild. In
Yeah,
January
so
1977.
with no in 1977 with no promotion, this weird record. Yeah, it didn't. They didn't fare so well in America, which I'm not surprised because these are very un-American record. I mean, you go from Young Americans to these. Yeah, these are very European records. The European canon is here.
Isn't it crazy to think that we went from, I mean, bearing this is 1977, we go from like pure kind of glam Ziggy stuff to this in the space of what, 5 years? I mean, it is really remarkable when you think of it. Do you want a bit of flair from Nicholas Pegg? I've got the Buckley book here, but let me just read a bit about the making of Low before we start going through the tracks.
Okay, before we go to Pegg, I just want to orient people. So we ended with Station to Station, in which Bowie was living in Los Angeles and he was completely coked out of his brain. To the point where he probably wouldn't have made it through the 70s had he not decided that enough was enough. And so what sort of preceded these records is that he and Angela pulled up and moved to France and Switzerland. Basically, he just needed a clean break and to get away. And so that's the sort of where we're at. Bowie had just almost completely done himself in with his cocaine addiction and his, sort of mental instability. And so he's a very fragile character at this point. Yeah.
I mean, is it too crass to say, it's Iggy Pop and David Bowie in rehab, basically?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they did, and they went off together. I mean, both of them said, we're not going to make it if we don't get out. So yeah, and so it is Iggy Pop and Bowie in rehab in a way.
So Pegg says 1976 was a crisis year for Bowie. Crippled by cocaine, he haunted the stage during a 5-month world tour in the David Live / David Dead tour that we talked about last time. Offstage, he faced a concerted media backlash in the wake of his alleged Nazi salute at Victoria Station, and some perversely inappropriate, given the rise in Britain of the far-right organisations such as the British Movement and the National Front, observations about Hitler, and the need for a new right-wing government to seize the reins of power. In the eyes of many, in the eyes of many, despite the excellence of his recent recordings, Bowie had flagrantly abused his position as a star. Bowie moved to France and to the Chateau de Hérouville studio near Paris after the tour, and began work with Iggy Pop on songs which would form the Idiot album, another brilliant album. Although released after Low, these songs revealed Bowie road testing his new sound. Remarkable pieces such as Nightclubbing and Fun Time. I like Fun Time. Or the board for fun time. Mixed droll lyrics with minimalistic beats on Iggy's most groundbreaking album.
And by the way, I should add that the Idiot was released after Low because Bowie made sure that it was. He didn't want the Idiot to come first, because even though Bowie basically, that's mostly his work. I mean, Iggy Pop did the lyrics, but I think all the music on the Idiot was Bowie, and so he didn't want people to think that Low was influenced by the Idiot, so he made sure that it was released after Low.
Yeah, very true. By the time Bowie felt ready to record, his new sound was very much forming before the sessions began in August, showing once again his unerring knack for picking the right collaborators. Bowie brought Visconti back as a producer and also asked Brian Eno, late of Roxy Music, to collaborate during the sessions. The previous year, Eno had released 2 of his most important albums of the 1970s, Another Green World, another brilliant album, a meld of art and rock and electronics, and the instrumental ambient album Discreet Music, full of slow, quiet beauty. Low, originally entitled New Music Night and Day, I'm so glad he changed the title, can be seen as an attempt to retreat from the excesses and pressures of this very stardom. At a time when punk rock was noisily reclaiming the 3 minutes pop song in a show of public defiance, Bowie almost completely abandoned traditional rock instrumentation and embarked on a kind of introverted musical therapy. The sonics sound clean and pure, as if Bowie was attempting to exorcise the evil of his LA self. Yet Low is still a very troubled record, and spiritually is closer to Station than its successor Heroes. It was recorded late during the summer of 1976 at the Chateau de Herouville studio and at the Hansa Studios in Berlin. Brian Eno remembers, "What I think he was trying to do was to duck the momentum of a successful career. The main problem with success is that it's a huge momentum. It's like you've got this big train behind you and it all wants to carry on going in the same way. Nobody wants you to step off those tracks and start looking around in the scrub around the edges because nobody can see anything promising there." One of the most unusual features of the recording process was the use of Eno's oblique strategies cards, which he had developed with Peter Schmidt in 1975. They formed a sort of musical tarot, over 100 musical dilemmas, according to the author, and contained directives on the work in the studio, such as listen to the quiet voice, fill every beat with something, emphasize the flaws, mute and continue, and use an unacceptable color.
Yep.
Eno urged Bowie to experiment and to think in non-linear ways about the recording process, and he went on to develop this new approach through the rest of the decade. For Bowie fans, the resulting album could hardly have been more challenging. He had completely abandoned narrative structures in the songs. The songs, which form the first side of the album, sound like mere fragments or half-reported conversations. Side 2, comprising 4 longer pieces of music, 2 featuring Bowie singing in an invented language, reportedly gave RCA a collective coronary and led one executive to suggest that Bowie might relocate back to LA to record more young American style hit material. Bowie, however, had the last laugh. Sound and Vision, the album's first single, reached number 3 in the UK charts. Low, never a big seller on release, remains an uncompromising work, but it has attained an almost mythic status within the rock pantheon and is now regarded as perhaps the defining work of art rock. It stands as a template for adventuresome pop music which has never been equaled since. The significance of Low in the general scheme of things cannot be overstated, and it stands not only as Bowie's most innovative work to date, but as a landmark in popular music history. Its prescient use of ambient music structures and Bowie's blacked-out expressionless vocals influenced a whole generation of British post-punk artists, from Joy Division to Gary Newman. Perhaps more importantly, just as punk was helping to democratize the guitar, Bowie and Eno, along with Germany's Kraftwerk, were making the synthesizer cool and poppy after a decade of Emerson, Lake and Palmer and pseudo-classical meanderings. Philip Glass restructured 3 tracks, Warsaw, Subterraneans, and Samar, for his puzzlingly jauntily near-romantic Low Symphony. Have you listened to the Philip Glass Low Symphony?
Once. I listened to it. They did it. He did it Low and a Lodger as well, and I can't. I like some Philip Glass, the early weird stuff, but oof.
Yeah. I only really like piano solo, or it's called solo piano.
Solo piano, yeah. I like the really weird, sort of music with changing parts and things like that. The really early, really really pretentious stuff.
Perhaps Bowie is happy to leave what many regard as his definitive statement untouched and unadorned. Incidentally, the cover artwork, based on a still from the Man Who Fell to Earth, which shows a duffel-coated Bowie in profile against an unnatural raging fire of the sky, was intended as a punning statement on Bowie's new solitude, his low profile. Hardly corset snapping humor, to be sure, but not bad from someone who only a year before had been surviving on a staple diet of cocaine, red peppers, and milk slugged straight from the carton. So there we go. So, shall we make a start there? So the album starts off with Speed of Life, and I've
Yeah.
always liked the way it comes in as if it's already been playing. I
Exactly,
think,
as if you walked in on something. Yeah.
and I think Eno has talked about this somewhere, where they had this idea of, I can't remember what they call it now, but they had this idea that they always wanted this idea that the music just exists and it kind of exists outside of the record and you're catching a glimpse of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember it. Maybe Buckley has got the name for it. Let's have a look. It's called. He gave it a name. They gave it a name. Like Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. They had
Yeah.
their own name. Can't remember what it was now. Total Sound, was it? I can't remember. But anyway, that basic idea that there are elements of the song that exist outside of what you actually hear. And I think it's straight off in Speed of Life when it comes in. And then the sound immediately hits you. It's really different. It's synthesizer and that distorted snare drum thing that they use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to add a few things. First of all, I mean, I think people overstate Brian Eno's participation with all these records, but especially this one. I mean, Eno was not. He didn't do a huge amount on Low. The record that he was sort of he was most involved with Heroes and Lodger, especially Lodger. But and obviously he's present on Low, but his contributions were much more minimal in this record. So I think people overstate that. Certainly he didn't produce them. He didn't produce any of these records. People sometimes think that produced some of these records from this period, but it's Visconti. Second, of course, it's called the Berlin Trilogy, but almost the entirety of Low was recorded at Chateau de Hérouville in France, and Lodger was mostly recorded at Mountain Studio in Switzerland and in New York. So strangely enough, I mean, I think they're more spiritually about Berlin than they are, sort of products of that period. Yes, and of course, as you mentioned, I mean, one of the huge innovations of Low was especially the drum sound. I mean, it's very difficult to overstate how influential that was and how many people copied that sound and have copied it ever since. I put in the folder of pictures. Actually, I put a picture of the kit that's used for.
Let me pull that up. Hold on.
See if you pull that up.
Let me share my screen a minute. Deep in your room, never leave your room.
Something deep inside me.
Okay, yeah. Where are we?
And the file's called.
Oh, why is it doing that?
I don't know why it's doing that. Why is it doing that? Right here.
Okay, is this? No, that looks like Heroes era.
Yeah, these are pictures from the session for Low Heroes.
That is an absolutely appalling moustache.
Isn't that amazing?
When did Bowie have a moustache? I didn't know
he had it during Heroes. That's him and Visconti and the engineer from Hansa. Yeah, amazing. I can't. He looks a bit like David Hemmings in Blow Up or something. There, I don't know.
Okay.
You see the picture of that box?
Yes, yeah.
There it is. Yes. So that thing is the Eventide H910. It's so named actually after the Beatles. There's a Beatles song called One After 909, and so they called this thing the 910 because that's one after 909. Anyway, this thing, which came out basically at the same time as Low, slightly before Low, it was revolutionary because it was the first pitch shift device. In other words, you could shift the pitch of an input without affecting its speed. So prior to this, of course, if you wanted to make something higher, you had to speed the tape up, and of course that's going to have its concomitant problems. But this thing could actually shift pitch. It could do a few other things too. It had delay, and it had a few other bits of processing on it. But this thing was extremely revolutionary, and Visconti got a hold of one or two of these, and this is what he used to make that snare drum sound. And if people have never heard this record, I mean, listen to like Breaking Glass, like that drum sound at the beginning of it, which sounds like, I don't know, like tins exploding or something. It's sort of very, very sharp, percussive, smack you in the head sound. And of course, everyone is immediately when they heard it, they said, "Oh my God, I've got to do this. How did you do that? How did you do that?" And I don't think Visconti's ever really talked about it, but of course, people know that this is the kit he used to do it. But there's some very complicated studio trickery going on. I mean, if you're a techno geek like I am, like these three records there's some amazing stuff going on. They did some amazing things in the studio.
And of course, non-digital, non-computer, no Apple Macs involved.
No, it's all analog synthesizers at this point. And so yeah, there's some famous kit. You've got your mini Moog, you've got your ARPs. Brian Eno famously used this portable keyboard from EMS called Synthi AKS, which is very much integral to the sound, especially on Heroes. So all this kit, which was fairly new in the 70s, yes, was very sort of important. But I think it also highlights this idea that, I mean, someone like Visconti, he caught on this sound. I mean, just this one particular thing that he could do with a simple snare drum, and kind of built these whole structures around it, and I think Bowie and Eno also worked that way as well. I mean, Eno especially at this period was thinking about just sound as a color, sound as a kind of tool in itself, and it's just not a kind of rock and roll way to think about constructing music, None of these are sort of, this is not a jam session, this is a sort of like total tinkering session, these records. So yeah, it's quite fascinating, and they are really products of the studio. I mean, I tend to really like, being a visual artist, I'm very much attracted to the idea of things that can only be constructed in the kind of hermetic environment of the studio, rather than, I've never been a fan of like jazz improv or anything like that. I like construction. I like that sort of hermetic structure, and I think these records really, that's one of the things that I like so much about them. But anyway,
well, we go from Speed of Life, which is an instrumental track, to Baby I've been Glass in your room again. Listen.
See, God, there's so many great noises on these records. Yeah, that synthesizer wail is incredible.
I have to say, as much as the instrumental second side is, this first half of Low is just fucking epic. It really is. But there's a bit of flair from David Buckley on Breaking Glass. He says, little more than a bizarre song fragment, and in its original form, one of the shortest Bowie tracks. Breaking Glass epitomizes the experimental nature of the Low project. According to Tony Visconti, Bowie suffered from acute writer's block during the Low sessions. Encouraged by Brian Eno to turn every circumstance to good advantage, he ended up with songs like this, less than 2 minutes long and with only the sketchiest lyric. The feeling around was that we'd edit it together, explained Eno, and turn it into a more normal structure. And then I said, no, don't. Leave it abnormal. Leave it strange. Don't normalize it. So Breaking Glass makes a virtue of its brevity, etching out a sharp, disturbing portrait of a half-demented lover before imploding into a blast of synthesizers. And then Peg says that the lyrical content is minimal, as if the singer is so traumatized he can hardly speak. The music is angrily insistent, and there's that clever 3-note synth swoop from speaker to speaker. So there we go. Elsewhere, they credit Carlos Alomar It says Breaking Glass owes everything to guitarist Carlos Alomar in the left channel, who delivers the lead with the swagger to rival Mick Ronson. So there we go. There's all sorts of things going on in the Breaking Glass.
All sorts of things, yeah. I mean, and also this is something. I mean, we've seen pop music sort of flirt with this idea of kind of presenting the fragment as the finished product. I mean, certainly most notably with the Beatles in on Abbey Road, which has got a sort of whole parade of bits and bobs that McCartney and Lennon never really finished, and you can hear that whole run. I can't. Let me just look, because I think it's certainly quite a precedent. Yeah, I mean, basically, Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, Golden Slumbers. I mean, all of those are just sort of pieces, and you can also hear that in other things. I mean, McCartney, I mean, on Ram, did like Admiral Halsey, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, which is just a bunch of chunks of things that have nothing to do with each other that ran together. So
yeah,
but building a whole record on that, like he did in Low, I think that's taking it another huge step.
Yeah, the only other two records I can think of, there are two other records that do this at any great length. One is the commercial album by The Residents, which obviously came out in 1980, which famously has the pretentious kind of blurb at the front that a pop song is the same idea repeated 3 times. So if you want to turn these into songs, repeat the track 3 times, basically.
Yeah. And maybe write a bridge in the middle.
Yeah. And then the other one is the kind of post-punk new wave album, Double Nickel on the Dime by the Minutemen, where a lot of the songs are just 1 minute long as well. Kind of these kind of fragments that never actually develop into proper songs. But I don't think any of them do it quite as well as the first half of Low, to be honest.
No. Yeah, and I think it was a quite a bold decision to just let them be as they are. I mean, because the first side of Low is that there is a manic, insanity to the kind of tone of all of those things. I mean, it's a very aggressive, very unstable, sort of. I mean, if you were to kind of discern a narrator in the midst of all that, it was very much a kind of an unhinged character, so to speak. Even though it's not a character like we seen with Aladdin Sane and all of Bowie's other more fleshed out characters. There's still a kind of character there, or the kind of husk of one.
Yeah, it gets even more intense on the next track, What in the World, because I mean, I'm just looking, you're just a little girl with grey eyes. Never mind, say something. Way to kill the crowd. I mean, it is a kind of and I think Iggy Pop is in the background of that song as well to kind of add to the general feeling of madness. Is that right? Is Iggy Pop?
Yes, I believe this song was originally at least some part of it was going to be on The Idiot, but it was repurposed. It was slated for inclusion on The Idiot, and Iggy Pop is in the background, and also that's.
They consider releasing this as a single.
As a single. Well, the fact that they managed to release any of these as a single is sort of amazing. But and there's also that weird sort of almost video game.
Yes, it's like Pac-Man. It sounds like Pac-Man or something, doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah, that's I believe that's a sound that only Brian Eno would make, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, that's a very strange song.
But I mean, there are these kind of because he's on this album. Some of the lyrics are spoken, some of it is going the low Bowie, but he's also just got these dramatic, I'm just looking at the chorus. It goes, so deep in your room, you never leave your room.
Something deep inside of me.
Yeah. But then by the time you get to talking through the gloom, What in the world can you do? What in the? I mean, it did. It
I'm
kind
in
of
the mood for your love.
for your love. It is mental. It really is mental.
Yeah,
So there is this kind of it's like the sonic equivalent of listening to a mind come apart in a way,
yeah,
or a mind that has been apart trying to come back together, maybe in keeping with the general what they were actually doing around this time. So maybe
yeah.
so anyway, we get from and I see, for me, I love those tracks almost more than the better known, like we're about to talk about Sound and Vision and Be My Wife, and they were the singles from the album. But
Hmm,
I kind of love these mental kind of half fragment, Breaking Glass, What in the
yeah,
World, and
yeah.
Always Crashing in the Same Car as well. They're just amazing. Um, so yeah, what Sound and Vision? If you stuck on Sound and Vision for a kind of normie, it's kind of quite a pleasant single, isn't it? Don't you think?
Oh, it's got that wonderful. It's got that wonderful sort of repeated musical figure in it. That's just so sort of recognizable, and yeah, I mean, it sounds almost normal. uh, I mean, it's
Did,
good, but again, I mean, you read the lyrics, and of course, I don't know if we've mentioned, but the lyrical writing in these records was very scattershot, especially Heroes, which we'll mention when we come to it. But even in this, I mean, Bowie began with Low, and he continued it for the rest of his career, but sort of building up songs backwards. So he would basically, for the rest of his career, he sort of worked this way, which he would lay down backing tracks, and then they would lay down overdubs, and then finally they would put on the singing. You know, the singing and the lyrics were the last thing, and many of these lyrics were sort of made up, in the studio whilst they were working on the music, and most of the musicians had no idea what any of this material was going to turn into. I mean, in terms of kind of giving it all structure with words, that didn't come till like the very end. So it's quite extraordinary also that even with that very disjointed way of working, there is a kind of very coherent feeling about this record. That, as you said, that sort of idea of a mind kind of coming apart, or trying to go back together again. Even though I don't know that that was conscious, I think it was just the product of his. I mean, this way of working really allows the kind of emotions and feelings of a moment in your life to kind of seep in, because it's all about just doing things in the moment rather than kind of deliberately composing songs.
mm, yeah, no, I mean, Sound and Vision is a nice kind of retreat song as well, isn't it? Wanting to be alone. Blue, blue, electric blue. That's the color of my room where I will live.
Pale blinds drawn all day, nothing to read, nothing to say. I mean, this is my dream,
Yeah,
and you will sit right down and wait for the gift of sound and vision, whether it comes or not. Who
it's
knows?
interesting. It's interesting. I very seldom draw the curtains in the lodge. Do you know that?
Oh,
they,
I've,
they,
I've
they're usually shut. I don't want people prying to see what I'm up to.
exactly, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So then we have Always Crashing in the Same Car. Interestingly, I I used to play this to my ex, because I always thought that it was a song about us in many ways, just making the same mistake over and over again. For
Yeah.
for a decade before we got divorced.
Before you
Finally, before I'd had enough. But yes. But apparently, there's a bit of a story behind this song. That it's actually based on a real life story.
Oh,
Um,
Jasmine. Yeah,
yeah,
we get a name as well.
the Jasmine is a real person. Let me just
Oh,
find this. Yeah, I didn't know. This is from Peg. Just trying to find it. Always Crashing in the Same Car.
yeah. Now that I'm looking at the lyrics here, it does seem very specific. Going round and around the hotel garage must have been touching close to '94.
Yes. The lyrics make direct reference to an unfortunate incident in which David drunkenly wrote off his 1950s Mercedes while recklessly negotiating an underground parking lot in Berlin.
Oh,
According to the song, I was going round and round the hotel garage, must have been close to touching 94. But on a wider so there we go. Also, Tony Visconti recalled that David spent quite a while writing the melody and lyrics, and even recorded a verse in a quasi Bob Dylan voice, but it was too spooky, not funny as intended. And so he asked me to erase it, and we started again. So,
oh, I'd love to hear that one.
yeah, well, unfortunately, it was erased, so there's
Yeah,
no.
raised.
I'd
No.
love to hear the outtake at least. But then Peg says, but on a wider scale, the song operates as a metaphor for Bowie's convulsive career swings, lifestyle changes, and obsessive traveling. Every chance that I take it on the road. As metaphors go, it's a succinct one, consisting of a mere 2 verses, typically of low. Bowie's sense of his own underachievement provides a sharp contrast with the sublime accomplishment of the track itself. But by the way, of these 2 critics, Peg and Buckley, Peg is by far the more sycophantic. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
He's just like, he is always basically, almost bending over with praise of Bowie, whereas Buckley is a bit more acerbic. There was a gadget called a harmonizer was used on this. Was that box you were talking?
Yeah, that's the Evertide.
Yeah, this created a drop in pitch for the drums. Dennis Davis was on the drums, and this is a song that really uses that. The Always Crashing in the Same Car uses that technique quite a lot. Yes, imagine driving 94 miles an hour in a hotel garage.
Hotel garage. Oh dear, oh dear.
And then we get the final real kind of song on the album, "Be My Wife."
Which is a very, it's quite a dire song. It's very wrought with emotional pain.
Yeah, have you ever seen the video for that? Because
yeah,
Bowie looks awful in that video. Like his teeth are falling out, and he just looks like he just looks like a kind of wreck of a man.
Well, he was. He really was.
At one point he tries to smile, and it's just horrible. Because it's in the same white kind of studio as the Life on Mars video.
Yeah, right. The unpainted cycle.
Yeah, but if you've never seen that video for "Be My Wife," I would watch it, because it kind of gives a certain complexion to this song, and it is a kind of cry for help, I guess.
Well, and I think the first verse is, I think, really resonates with a lot of Bowie's career and life. Sometimes you get so lonely, sometimes you get nowhere. I've lived all over the world. I've left every place. And we talk about rootless cosmopolitan. I think that's past a certain point, Bowie and probably everyone like him. That you end up. It's sort of like with Dylan. You just.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly just going from one hotel to the next,
but that they get addicted to that lifestyle as well, just life on the road, never really being at home. Well, in Dylan's case,
I think Dylan
touring now.
Oh yeah, and I think he certainly loves it, but I think for someone like Bowie, I think it was quite painful in a certain way. And of course, there's large parts of his life where he didn't do it at all. Basically completely retired from it for the last 16 years of his life almost. So
yeah, it's actually an interesting part to think about. The rock star basically is always on tour, seldom at home, and how that may change them. And I always think of how weird it is, for example, that Harry Nilsson never went on tour. He never, at any time in his career, he had like a mortal fear of performance or something.
So I didn't know that.
He basically never left his house or anything. And it just makes you think. It's just like, oh, that seems strange, but then it's like, oh, hold on a second, maybe that makes Harry Nilsson more normal than most rock stars. In a strange roundabout way.
Yeah.
Or even even when we talk about Paul McCartney, like going off to live on a farm in the middle of
Yeah.
Kent or wherever he was,
Well, and John Lennon did the same thing. I mean, basically, just almost completely stopped, you know, after a certain point. And also, I think the thing is, with sometimes it also has to do with, I mean, there's other things, obviously, but I think in the case of the Beatles, that it was just they couldn't perform those songs. I mean, again, those were pure products of the studio, and I mean, they could have performed them, but I just think at a certain point it became about a sort of, as I use that term, hermetic artistic practice rather than the days of playing live in smoky clubs. And I wonder, I wonder how much that, but of course Bowie was to go on. I mean, the 80s were basically Bowie doing the huge rock tours. That was the thing. So, no.
Yes. And then the album decides that that's it for normal songs.
That's it for normal songs.
I say normal, because we now hit the instrumental suite with a career in a new town, which I always thought was quite pleasant.
Yeah.
In the overall context of this album, is even, dare I say it, got a hint of warmth to it.
A hint, just a hint. I think also that song was meant to have a lyric, but ended up not having one. So
let's have a look to see if there's.
Yeah, I actually think a couple of these songs Bowie had intended to sort of to structure them more like standard songs, and then I believe it was Eno who said, if it's not coming to you, don't do it, don't force it, let them be instrumental.
Yes. There's also a harmonica solo on the song.
Yes,
which
very
is rare,
strangely,
from
which works
Bowie.
very well. I mean, I'm very not committed to the harmonica. As much as I love Dylan, like occasionally I feel that it's an intruder.
Yeah, I don't like the harmonica either. It's grating, isn't it? But
Yeah.
he plays it really nicely.
Yeah, and it works really well, and of course it's slightly distant. It sounds slightly distant from the song, the way they kind of might have recorded it. So yeah, it's very effective, this song.
Yeah, I mean, somebody in the chat saying how many of the instrumentals are really Eno's. I don't. The thing
Very
is
few,
that
very few of them. This is one thing I really wanted to stress. People overdo Eno's influence on it. I mean, for instance, Eno was very heavily involved in Heroes, and yet his contribution was 2 weeks. He was there for 2 weeks, actually working on it, and then when he was done, he left. And most of the work, especially on Low, most of the work is not Eno at all. I mean, Eno is there. He certainly, they had lots of conversations. He was present for some of the sessions. He did make lots of noises, and certainly his influence is there quite heavily, because I think Bowie was very deliberately thinking about the things that Eno had done, like discrete music, which is various sort of tinkerings with Pachelbel's Canon in D, but which is wonderful record. I mean, one of the reasons I like, I'm a huge Eno admirer, so yes, I certainly, but I think it's overstated what he did here.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is that he was more of a kind of like spiritual guide, if that makes any sense, where he was just kind of like a management consultant, if you want to put it less.
Yeah, I mean, that's how he always worked. I mean, he is an extraordinary musician, but not in the kind of classical sense. He certainly can't really play the guitar. A lot of his work with synthesizers was with that synthy AKS, which doesn't even have a keyboard. It has a joystick. If you watch a lot of the things when he was with Roxy Music, he was again using these things that had no keyboard interface. So I mean, he's an excellent musician, but yeah, I think your characterization of him as a spiritual guide. I mean, he was a kind of guru, and that's how he's usually treated. You know, he sort of comes in and he kind of, I think, I can't remember who said that, is a sort of mind expanding drug for artists who are at the end of their rope. You know, I mean, the Talking Heads, famously, with Fear of Music, called Eno in when they were at the end of their rope and they didn't know what to do, and his guides, of course, produced that brilliant, that
Yeah.
brilliant record.
My
So,
my, my
but I
favorite.
mean,
My
his
favorite.
actual involvement in playing is very limited. So yes.
Yeah. I didn't actually know was involved in Fear of Music, but that's my favorite Talking Heads album as well. Anyway, we go from a career in a new town to Warsaw, which is like a kind of funeral dirge with kind of Dadaist nonsense lyrics at the end of it. And this is probably like the least pub-like track ever. That was the one that I typically play in that jukebox, D. But what do you make of Warsaw? D? I think I've lost him. Oh, we've lost him. Don't know what's happened there. Well, let me find some flair for Warsaw, and we'll find some flair. I'm afraid D is being raided by the FBI. Did the FBI get you, D? Sorry.
No. My internet just craps out because it's crap. I thought I was moving to the land of great connectivity, but no, that didn't work out. So.
What do you make of Warsaw?
Well, sour. I think I don't know how that's pronounced actually, but yeah. I mean, very curious song, of course. Sulla vidi lehu, which all those lyrics, which sound extraordinarily meaningful, they don't mean anything. It's just made up. But it does have that. It does have that sort of chant. Almost like a kind of religious chant.
Like Gregorian, almost, aren't they?
Yeah, almost. Celli vengo Deo. Wonderful. I mean, I love that song. I think a lot of the songs on side 2, if I remember correctly, are they were meant to be sort of evocative of the kind of atmosphere or the kind of way that Bowie was thinking about Eastern Europe at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and certainly, I think this is a sort of imagined journey through, Yugoslavia or something. I don't know.
I have to say, because as you know, I was listening to these albums back to back earlier, but I listened to Low when I was in the car. I was driving to, as I often do around here. I often drive to the shop, because I'm only ever in the lodge for like a day or two, so it's seldom worth actually going shopping. So I just pop out to get some food. But I'm surrounded by forests here, and I don't know if you've ever like driven through, where there are trees kind of arching over you. A lot of the driving around here is like that. And driving through that with Art Decade and Weeping Warlong was strangely evocative. I have to say, it was like, I'm appreciating these songs in a new way, because I'm not like alone in my room. I'm driving through trees, and it was kind of weirdly exhilarating, I have to say. Yes. The critics talk about Philip Glass quite a lot here. Why would they be talking about Philip Glass for Weeping Wall? Oh, he's gone again. Damn it. Let me just pull up some flair on Art Decade. Deep in your room, you never leave your room. Something deep inside of me, yearning through the gloom. I'm in the mood for your love. So Art Decade, it says, explaining that low was his reaction to certain places. Bowie said that in 1977 that Art Decade was about West Berlin, a city cut off from the world, art and culture, dying with no hope of retribution. Hence the obvious pun for Bowie's perception of West Berlin is of Art Decade. Its hauntingly sparse instrumental distinguished the beautiful cello playing of Hansa engineer Edouard Meyer. Tony Visconti, who also scored the cello part and originally intended to play it himself until Meyer revealed himself to be the cellist. So there we go, and it was played throughout the 1978 tour. Weeping Wall was Philip Glass's neoclassical accumulative work in which the process of music making is as obvious as the end result, is an obvious influence on the instrumental track, which again takes Berlin as the subject matter, where he plays all instruments and set the shiny but real timbres of the xylophone and vibraphone against the synths. Hello, Dee. Sorry,
I'm afraid I'm going to. It seems like I'm going to be having internet trouble. So if I drop out, just let me back in when I reroute my router.
I was just saying when you went out, I went for a drive around here where I don't know if you've ever been for a drive where you're surrounded by trees. You know, they're kind of archways of trees.
Oh yes,
that's where it's like around where the lodge is. And listening to Art Decade and Weeping Wall in that context made me see these songs in a completely different way because it was really evocative. But reading the flair on them, they're both songs which are meant to be about West Berlin being a literally art decade cut off from the rest of the world, which kind of interests me because I would always think about East Berlin being cut off from the rest of the world, but West Berlin at this time, why would that have been cut off from the rest of the world? Because I mean, that was like nominally part of the West. So why was Berlin kind of a part in that way?
I think Berlin. I mean, you know, I went there in the 80s, and I have very very vague recollections of it. But I think a lot of it was so hollowed out and had been so thoroughly destroyed by the war and then by the economic deprivations and the American, you know, sort of influences and such, and that it just it took an extraordinarily long time to recover, you know. And I think that there were huge parts of Berlin, you know, West Berlin that was still wreckage, like well into the 80s, you know. I mean, just blight, you know, and there was a lot of kind of industrial sort of blight, and the rebuilding took a hell of a long time. You wouldn't think of it stretching, you know, 30-40 years after the war, but it did. So I think, and also I think again, just this idea that being cleaved in twain by the war, I mean, it hurt people on both sides, you know. I think there's this sort of blinkered Western idea that, you know, oh, all those poor people over there, and we're over here with our, you know, Walkmans and our Levi's, but it didn't really work that way. I think it was just a disaster on both halves. And if you watch anything from those periods, I mean, it very much has that feeling.
My image of Berlin, which probably belongs to a slightly later period, is of like punks in leather jackets and like the fashion being like 10 years behind here, you know, like kind of really kind of almost kind of like Thatcher era graffiti, but like in 1992 and stuff like that, you know, like kind of you know, and men with moustaches. And
yeah, I think there was certainly some of that. But yeah, it's very weird. And of course, there's another weird thing, which is where all these basically you can tell when an area was completely destroyed during the war, because now it's like a shopping mall. Like basically every area that that was reduced to complete rubble ended up becoming a kind of shopping mall. You know, a sort of big, ugly, you know, Americanized sort of arcade in the middle of, you know, what was left of the old city. So yeah,
I mean,
it's a bit odd.
another way of looking at it is the sad reality of a country under occupation, really.
Yeah, indeed.
And,
And both halves of Berlin were under occupation.
yes.
Yeah,
but the west half was arguably more demoralized, more subject to psychological torture than the east side.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I mean, as awful as elements of being in East Berlin at that time, but they were also spared a lot of other things, and that unfortunately the rest of Germany wasn't.
So then we get Subterraneans at the end of the album, which was recorded for Bowie's abandoned soundtrack of The Man Who Fell to Earth. In
Yes.
fact, Subterraneans was the very first track recorded for Low.
Yeah.
I.e. was recorded for this abandoned soundtrack, and they just stuck it on the end of Low, which is why it sounded a little bit different from the rest of the album. I would argue, tiny bit different from the rest of the album.
It does, yeah. You're right. It is slightly different in tone. I really like that bit, and also the kind of lyrics which were added much later are very Brian Eno. There's a number of, like, if you listen to Before and After Science, I mean, there's whole songs where where the lyrics are just basically nonsense made up to fit the sound.
What is it, like Shirley?
Yeah. Share bride, failing star, Caroline, riding me, Shirley, own. And that certainly was certainly an influence from Eno, like the idea of using words as just a sound, and also something that he probably got from doing the cut ups and such. But that's a very evocative piece of music.
Now, if there's ever been an album that is a direct sequel to the previous album, surely it's Heroes, because I mean, he recorded it almost directly following Low, much the same personnel, but it's also got exactly the same structure. So the first half, from Beauty and the Beast to Blackout, are songs, and then the second half, from V2 Schneider to The Secret Life from V2 Schneider to what's it called? Nukon. Yeah.
Which was an area of which again was an area of West Berlin where the Turks moved when they were bringing in all the Turks to help them rebuild. That's where they all went. So.
Oh, I didn't know that's why the Turks went there, because there's a shitload of Turks in Germany.
That is all of those immigrants were brought in for the reconstruction of Berlin, and so the I'm afraid the writing was on the wall a long time
ago. Good pun. The wall.
Thank you.
Wall. Let's let me just because I think this is from the Heroes era, right? This is the Heroes crew, because he's wearing the jacket that he wears in the video.
Yeah. So we've got Eno on the right, and then obviously Bowie in the middle, and then Robert Fripp on the left. And that Robert Fripp is the giant meteorite blessing from space that came in on Heroes, and it's very much the sound of Heroes. I think comes from Robert Fripp's contribution.
I mean, Fripp has got such a distinctive sound and style, doesn't he? He's all over this album, and
all over it. Yeah,
it's well, I mean, you have to listen to it to know what we're on about, but it's unmistakable once you hear it. One thing that struck me listening to this, before we get into the flair and all that earlier on, when this came on, I was like, holy shit, as mental as the songs on Low are, his vocal performance is insane on this album. It's just mental, not just on the title track, on all of the vocal tracks. It's just, I mean, it's probably as insane as Bowie was ever on a record, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, My, someone fetch a priest.
Mama!
You can't say no to the Beauty and the Beast, darling.
So good. So good.
Yes. So, okay, a bit of flair then. Let me just find.
Okay.
Peg.
And then I'll come in with my own flair if it's not covered.
Yes. Hold on a minute. In fact, you might as well share your bit of flair now because I think it's quite mind blowing.
Okay, so I think, I mean, again, I mentioned Robert Fripp, which can't his influence on this can't be overstated. I am a big, huge King Crimson admirer, and so Robert Fripp, I would say Fripp and Eno are like weirdly connected to almost every bit of popular music that I like. And then if you add Adrian Belew, you basically you can connect every record that I like to every other record that I like. And Fripp, a very interesting point in his career because he basically sort of stopped playing. I mean, he left King Crimson, which sort of was the usual way that King Crimson worked. It wasn't really a band; it was kind of a project, and it would be started up and stopped. But by the time that Heroes came along, I think Fripp could basically not really play the guitar for years, for like a couple of years, 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
And so and I don't think he was the first choice for Bowie. I think Bowie wanted the guitarist from Neu. I think we didn't mention, but Bowie and Eno at this period were extraordinarily influenced by what is being called krautrock.
Yeah,
Which is
we talked about this when we did Station to Station last week. We talked
German
about
new music of this period,
Yeah.
like like Neu and Harmonia and Cluster and and Faust and Can and all of these wonderful groups. But certainly they were really immersed in this, and I think Bowie wanted to bring, because I think Neu is probably the biggest influence on these records, and I think Bowie wanted, but we don't really know because Bowie had been denied that and such. But however it worked out, Eno called Robert Fripp in New York and said, well, we're doing this record and you want to see what you could do. And Fripp said, well, I haven't, I haven't played it for a few years, but if you're willing to give me a chance, I'll do it. And then the next day, a first class ticket on Lufthansa arrived, and Fripp flew over to Berlin and literally from the airport went to the studio and began playing this music, which he had no idea what any of it was. I mean, they none of the musicians were privy to any of the kind of constructions that Bowie and Eno had sort of talked about and come up with, and Visconti had come up with. They just said, here's some ideas, here's the chord structure we want you to do, just play. And so he did, and I think I don't think he was there long. I think he was there for like 3 days or something. Fripp.
Well, I've got a bit of flair from Peg here. This is
Okay.
If this is true, this is absolutely mind blowing. Above all else, it was Fripp's unique guitar sound which sets Heroes apart from its predecessor. Fripp did everything in about 6 hours, straight off the plane from New York. Eno later told the Enemy. He arrived at the studio at 11 p.m. and we said, "Do you fancy doing anything?" So I plugged him into the synthesizer for treatments, and we just played virtually everything we'd done at him, and he just started up without even knowing the chord sequence. By the next day, he'd finished, packed up, and gone home. It was all first takes. Incredible.
Yep.
Many years later, Bowie recalled, "The only premise that I gave him was to play with total abandonment and in a way that he would never consider playing on his own albums. I said, play like Albert King,' and he would look puzzled for a few moments, and then he'd go in and try his damnedest to get somewhere near it, but it would come out this way. So things like Joe the Lion were really him having a bash at the blues. He was great like that. He really got into the swing of it." So that's it. He was there for 6 hours, played all his stuff, and went home.
I knew it was short. I didn't know it was. I thought it was like 3 days. I didn't know it was
it's just mind blowing.
Yeah. And furthermore, the entire record was produced that way. There were almost no second takes. Almost everything on this record was a first take. Bowie's vocals, I think, almost without exception, were just first take. Occasionally they would redo once, but everything was first go with this.
Yeah, and this album, unlike Low, was entirely recorded at the Hansa by the Walls. I mean, literally in the Berlin Wall. Is that right, or right
Yeah,
next
well,
to it?
500 meters basically from the wall. I think there's. I remember, I remember um, Alomar talking about sitting there and looking out the windows and seeing the guards, looking in with the binoculars and such. So yeah, it was very, very close to the wall. Yeah. I mean, it used to be. So this studio was huge. I don't know if it's still there. It may still be there. It's massive. It was a concert hall, and then it became a ballroom for uh, SS officers, I think, um, during the war. And so it's a huge physical space, and it was quite advanced in terms of studio kit as well. So it was a really wonderful studio for them, and it gave them lots of kind of sonic choices, because it had a stage and it had a floor, and so they were able to do lots of things with positioning of microphones and positioning of various instruments. So yeah, so this was the only one of the Berlin trilogy that was completely produced in Berlin.
So the other thing that blew my mind, D, which we were talking about before we came on air, was that see, I had always thought that this was the album where the cut up lyric style really came into its own. I had just always assumed, because of the kind of non sequitur, like I am Robin Hood and I puff on my cigarette type stuff. But apparently Bowie went up to the microphone with no idea what the lyrics were and just came up with them on the spot.
Yes. So that's the other extraordinary thing about this record. Bowie, he really admired Iggy Pop's, because Iggy Pop had the ability to do this, where he could just get in front of a microphone and sing. He could improvise lyrics, and it worked out usually. And so he wanted to do the same thing with this record. And so the lyrics, the singing, the vocal lines, were all done last. There was everyone else had gone. I mean, Eno, as I said, was there for like 2 weeks. Fripp was there for a few hours. And so, but at the end, when it was just Visconti and the engineer and Bowie, they put down the lyrics. And I think with one exception, all of the lyrics were made up on the spot. Bowie literally, they ran the tape. He stood at the microphone and he sang and made these lyrics up in his head, which is just amazing.
Yeah, especially coupled with the mental delivery of those lyrics as well, which we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The impassioned, or the kind of pseudo impassioned, I guess. I don't know whether with Bowie whether it's actual or pretending to be, but
probably both. I would say it's a bit of both. I think it should be noted that the title of this album is not Heroes, but it's Heroes in quotes.
In inverted commas, yeah. In quotes, scare quotes.
Scare quotes, yeah. And I think that is it's very much sort of encapsulates that idea, whether it's real or whether it's a pastiche, whether we're heroes or whether we're quote heroes. So I do think that is embedded in it, And obviously, when you're making up words while standing at the microphone in the studio, I mean, there's a question about, most people will think of a song, you sit down to write a song for a purpose. You write a song to express some emotion or to tell a story. When you're just standing there, weaving down a byroad singing this song, that's my kind of high road gone wrong. I mean, there is a question about the authenticity of this at that point. It's amazing. Yeah, amazing.
There's quite a bit of other lore from Peg here. So one of the things that you might be interested in, there were whispers, sadly unfounded, that David was preparing to perform the song at ATV's The Muppet Show. Heroes, this is.
No!
I didn't promote Low at all, and some people thought my heart wasn't in it, he explained. This time I wanted to put everything into pushing this new album. I believe in the last two up. So they were literally thinking about promoting Heroes on the Muppet Show.
Amazing, because he did a huge spate of interviews for Heroes, unlike Low. Yeah. Oh, what could have been the thing that could have been? I mean, we got Alice Cooper on the Muppet Show, but we could have had Bowie.
Yeah, I mean, he did do the duet with Bing Crosby in this year as well, which is
I think that it was the same time, and he did that record of him narrating Peter and the Wolf.
Peter and the Wolf. Yes, in a lovely jumper, has to be said. The marketing slogan for the record was "There's old wave, there's new wave, and then there's David Bowie." So that was how it was marketed.
That's very
Uh,
good.
and there's a bit more lore about the kind of relationship between the various players in the studio while they were all there. It says the initial recording process was rapid, with a majority of the instrumental backings laid down during the first 2 days. We did second takes, but they weren't nearly as good, said Eno. We'd sort of say, let's do this then, and then we'd do it, and then someone would say stop, and that would be it. The length of the piece. It seemed completely arbitrary to me. David would say, okay, it's that twice as long as that, and then that. And then do this a couple of times, then come back to that. And in that tiny space of time, Carlos Alomar, who I do think, D, is an extremely underrated component of Bowie's band.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Through the years,
Yeah.
would have worked out this lovely melody line. All of those lovely, all of those little melody parts are his, and he thinks them out loud at lightning speed. He's quite remarkable. Equally spontaneous was Bowie's vocal work, as Visconti later attested. He'd never have a clue what he'd sing about until he actually walked in front of the microphone. Bowie confirmed that the songs were written with absolutely no idea of the consequences and no preconceptions of any kind. Eno later remembered an unusual aspect of the studio methodology. My recollection is, for some reason, we slipped into the Peter Cook and Dudley Moore characters. Bowie was Pete and I was Dud. Now, just to explain this to younger, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, D. They had these two characters, Pete and Dud, that they'd play, which kind of versions of themselves, and they'd go on kind of long, quite rambling improv conversations that were later. There was there were kind of later takeoffs of it between Smith and Jones, I recall, and various others. But the originals were Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. It was hilarious. I don't think I've ever laughed so much making a record, which is funny when you think about how the album sounds. But I often think that you make music to the place that you aren't in. Bowie later confirmed Eno's recollection. We certainly had our share of schoolboy giggling fits. Brian and I did have Pete and Dud done pretty pat. Long dialogues about John Cage performing on a prepared layer at the Bricklayer's Arms on the Old Kent Road and such like. Quite silly. So there you go. You don't think about the fact that in the background they're joking, they're kind of doing comedy routines and things. So there we go. So shall we get into the album then? We've got starts off with Beauty and the Beast, which we've talked about a bit, which I mean, Fripp is immediately apparent. You've got the mad vocal stylings. And I just love how can I put it? Something about Heroes sounds a bit more urgent and a bit more menacing in a way than Low. I mean, it's hard.
It's not as fragile as Low. I mean, I think Low really gives a sense of someone who is quite fragile, and I think there is a sort of weird malevolence to Heroes a bit.
It's something about the vocal style, the mix, it just has a bit more, something more sinister going on, I guess. That's the only way I can put it. And then we get Joe the Lion.
Joe the Lion.
I remember, by the way, when I first got this album as a teenager, thinking, what the fuck is this? It took me Heroes. It took me a while to get into because it's just so unlike anything. It's even unlike Low. I just don't. It's. But yeah, I mean, songs like this. But I mean, I've come to love them now. Obviously, I almost like these songs more than the famous songs like Heroes. Than the famous title track.
To give people a little insight into this song is actually about an artist named Chris Burton, who passed away a few years ago. He was a performance artist. I would say he was most well known for. And he did in the 70s, the early 70s. He did some completely outlandish things. I think his most famous Chris Burden work was that he had himself crucified on a Volkswagen Beetle, which this song refers to. Joe the Lion went to the bar, a couple of drinks on the house, and he said, "Tell you who you are if you nail me to my car."
The Buckley version of this story, D. Burden liked being put in a bag on the motorway, being hung over a pool of water with 2 electrodes in his hand, and yes, being nailed to a car.
Nailed to the car. Yeah, he did some very extreme performance pieces, which were also, I mean, he also understood the value of promote how that sort of shock would be the best sort of promotion. I mean, shock value literally in some cases was the kind of cornerstone of his career. So I think Bowie admired probably that sort of extreme self-promotion aspect in a weird way. I don't know if Bowie had ever met Chris Burden, but yeah.
Yeah, there's something about the way Joe the Lion progresses that makes you think, all right, now we're in. Remember when we were talking about Ziggy Stardust, and we were saying that, the album proper really, like, it kind of gets into the swing of things on was it Moon Age Daydream that we talked about, the second track, after 5 years is finished. And there's something about the way after the chorus, when you get into that first verse and it goes into that kind of half-spoken thing, and it feels like, all right, now we're in gear type thing. Now the album's really getting going. I've always had that feeling when listening to. I've had that feeling again earlier on. I also absolutely love on this song the way his voice breaks when he sings "Dreams." Just a couple of, because he really goes for it on a couple of occasions, but his voice sounds cracked and a bit kind of hoarse. I kind of love that, because it's like, well, this is a slightly more mature Bowie who's been around the block a few times now, and you can kind of hear the experience in his voice, if that makes any sense. I always like that when a singer has kind of grown into themselves, and you can hear it on this song.
Well, and hence your love of later Dylan.
My love of late Dylan as well. Yes, but I mean, his performance on Beauty and the Beast and Joe the Lion, but Joe the Lion especially, sounds like a man who's recovered from like near-death drug addiction. If that makes any sense,
But you're right. You're right. It is on the edge of just completely losing control, and which happens quite a number of times on this record. A couple of drinks on the house, and the way it's recorded as well. I mean, there's all sorts of processing done at various times with his voice, and obviously Visconti knew that Bowie was going to really launch into these lyrics, so he had to like gate some of the microphones because they didn't, they did. I know with Heroes they'd run out of tracks, so for the kids playing along in the old days, you had when these were recorded on analog tape on machines that had multi-tracks. I suppose these were 24-track machines, and so you had a limited number of tracks in which to put all these sounds. And by the time they'd finished Heroes and were ready to put his vocal, they only had like 2 tracks left, and so they had to be very creative about how they use those to put the vocals in, because they couldn't do any bouncing and they couldn't handle it. So there were lots of like limitations, and I think that, again, when you're recording someone who's screaming, you've got to be ready for that. So yeah, there's all sorts of weird things that I think inflect his voice so much and give it that strange quality at times. And of course, again, this is a very menacing song. I guess you'll buy a gun, you'll buy it secondhand, and you'll get up and sleep. I mean, famously, Chris Burden also did a piece where he allowed someone to shoot him
Wow.
So,
Yeah, the Chris Burden, by the way, is also the inspiration of One Outside, which Bowie returns to in the
oh,
90s, because you know that's all about a performance artist who's kind of obsessed with committing the perfect murder, right? But a lot
right.
of the kind of stuff that goes on there is said to be, in fact, the whole album is said to be a tribute to Chris Burden. So there
Oh,
we go.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I'm less familiar with that material, of course, but
I mean, you know, One Outside is nowhere near as good as Heroes as an
no.
album, but yes.
Then we get to Heroes, quote Heroes. Quote.
You know, I mean, it's great. This is one of the few Bowie songs that Joe normally may know from this era, right?
Yeah. Never
um,
intended to be the kind of hit that it became. That this was a sleeper hit, as far as I'm aware. And it wasn't until really the 80s with Live Aid that this song sort of took on the status that of the kind of, you know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely hate the idea of Heroes being appropriated by like Bob Geldof or
Exactly.
it's just it's a hideous idea, but
yeah,
yeah.
it becomes this hideous. Yeah, it becomes this horrible. You know, it sort of became the anthem of the, you know, tear down this wall, Miss President, or whatever. You know, it became the kind of, you know that I don't know. You may have been too young to sort of remember it, but there was this sort of period in late 80s, early 90s that was you had like Roger Waters and Scorpions and, you know, and it was this like, you know, the walls come down and, you know.
Yeah, David Hasselhoff in a leather jacket and
Yeah,
some
history has ended. History has ended. You know,
some guy with a moustache dancing for freedom and all this sort of stuff. Yeah,
you know, yeah, because happy West Germans, you know, carting off pieces of concrete and, you
well,
know,
I bet you're happy now, East Germans, aren't you? You know, Jesus Christ.
Oh dear, they might not freeze. They might not have frozen if none of that had happened.
At least you're not speaking German. Oh,
yeah.
You can't even say that in Germany. You can't even say that in Germany. Okay.
So yeah, I do hate the kind of connotations this song is taken on, but I mean, it is there. I mean, they very self-consciously were making songs about, you know, because it was a very different situation. I mean, you know, literally, you can't understand how weird the wall was unless you had seen it, you know, and certainly sitting in a studio 500 meters from it.
It's worth noting that the track Heroes also has the quotation marks, and Peg is on this. He says, it is by no means the feel-good anthem it's often been taken for. It's like the album whose name it shares, the title is embraced by quotation marks to embrace what Bowie called a dimension of irony. And despite its serenely uplifting chord sequence and the delirious abandon of the vocal, Heroes certainly has its dark side. There are hints at David's ongoing marital traumas alongside other biographical confessions. I wish I could swim is no mere aspirational image, for David genuinely couldn't, at least 10 years later, swim. I couldn't swim a stroke until last year, he said in 1987. Now I can do a couple of lengths of the pool.
Yeah. Now that's some flair.
In 2000, he revealed that I've never swum again. I swam once. It was quite enough for me. So he only swam that one time in 1987.
That's bizarre. That is so bizarre.
More ominous are the references to the binge drinking that temporarily took the place of cocaine in Berlin. Can you hear me? D? Can you guys hear me? Hello? Press 1 if you can hear me in the chat. D can't hear me. He's going to go again, but press 1. Is it? Yeah. Okay. The chat can hear me. It's D who's gone. Yeah, I'll just carry on reading this. It says, more ominous are the references to the binge drinking that temporarily took place of cocaine in Berlin. I became an alcoholic, he said later. I knew I had to pull away from that drug addiction, But what the body does is it lets itself open for any other kind of addiction. You replace one with another. And in my case, I went straight to whiskey and brandy and stuff like that. So there we go. Heroes sets its cautious optimism in the face of such human frailties. You can be mean, and I'll drink all the time is hardly the most promisingly heroic statement, and the repeated acknowledgement that nothing will keep us together presses home the point that time is short. It's surely significant that the reiterated just for one day harks directly back to David's most darkly personal lyrics. The Bowie brothers, the only way to be heroes forever and ever is to steal time. So that's what he says. Yes. But this is a Neverland which he now rejects, finally content to be what Quicksand had long ago described as a mortal with potential of a Superman. The real triumph is to be heroes just for one day, and by conferring heroism on the everyday, rather than on the extraordinary Bowie, was entering a territory far removed from his early 70s Ubermenschen. In doing so, he was notably adopting a favorite theme of many 20th century painters he had begun to closely admire. We still don't have D back. Heroes then is a painfully compassionate song that grasps at an optimistic future in the present, full of delusion. As Bowie explained, the song was about facing reality and standing up to it, achieving a sense of compassion, and deriving some joy from a very simple pleasure of being alive. D is back. D, I read a bit of Flair while you were gone. Did you know that Bowie briefly became an alcoholic during this period, in lieu of his cocaine addiction? That he lapsed basically into another addiction, and so the reference to "I'll drink all the time" on Heroes is a reference to that.
Yes, I was aware of that, and I know that. I mean, when he went to France and then Berlin and all of that, it he lapsed in and out. It was not a complete break, certainly from drugs and as you say, then sort of switching to alcohol. So no, I mean it was not an easy road, and yes, and there was quite a bit of.
What's this line here about Peg? It says, um, Bowie was entering it. So Bowie has said that the song is about facing up to reality, even just for a day, etc. Bowie was entering a territory far removed from his early 1960s Ubermensch stuff. In doing so, he was notably adopting a favorite theme of many of the 20th century painters he had begun most closely to admire. Do you have any sense of which painters Peg may be thinking about there?
Yes, I think that Bowie was very enamored of. There were certain movements. I mean, for instance, there was one called the Brücke, the bridge, of sort of German artists. In fact, I put a painting in the folder, which was which was partial inspiration for the cover of Heroes.
There's the cover of Heroes, famously.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the. Is that the cover? That's the cover, right?
That's the cover, I think, or that's the photograph that was used in the cover. Very close.
He's still into his milk look. I'm looking for this painting. Hold on.
Yeah, you'll fit.
There it is. There.
Eric Heckel. Yeah. And so yes, I mean he was particularly fond of kind of neo-expressionist, expressionist and neo-expressionist artists in Germany of the early 20th century. So you know, and others as well. I mean, certainly Heckel, and then famously Egon Schiele, who was also kind of inspiration for various images used. So
Egon Spengler.
No, Egon Schiele, not Spengler. Yes, and later on, of course, this falls. I mean, Bowie became a kind. You know, he had an art magazine, if you recall, in the 90s, and he collected a bit as well. He had he had some quite valuable and very good paintings. So also British expressionism Peter Lanyon and people like this. So, but it would have been the German expressionists that he would have liked so much, and these De Bruyne and other artists of that ilk, Franz Marc and such.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, we go unless you have anything else to say about the title track.
I would also, I don't know if you mentioned, but yeah, famously the vocals. What they wanted to do was record the vocals from 3 positions, but as I said, they didn't have enough tracks to do it. So what they wanted to do was mic him very close to his mouth, and then mic him from halfway across the room. And in the case, this room was a large hall, as I said, and then have a third microphone at the very far away, the back of the house, and do that on 3 different tracks. They didn't have the tracks, so what they did was just place the 3 microphones, put gates on 2 of them. So again, because Visconti knew that he was going to scream, so he had to make sure that he didn't blow out the audio with his screaming, and then recorded it all to 1 track. And so when you listen to it, you can't sort of hear it, but you're getting 3 different pictures of his performance from 3 parts of the room. So you're getting close, you're getting mid, and you're getting the back of the hall, all in that 1 record, which is one of the reasons it sounds the way it does. It has a very unique, strange sound, and that is how they did it. And of course, Robert Fripp's wonderful. It's like a tuned jet engine, that wonderful driving guitar motif. So yeah, it's quite an amazing track.
Now, this is the second most covered Bowie song after Rebel Rebel, and let me just go through some of the artists who covered it.
Oh,
and let's have I mean, I don't know most of these, but let's have a guess to see which is the worst of these covers and which is the best.
Which is the worst? Yeah.
Right. So here are the people who covered it: Oasis, the Smashing Pumpkins, Travis, Arcade Fire, Blondie, which also had Robert Fripp on guitar. The American rock band The Wallflowers, which I think is Bob Dylan's son's band, if my memory serves.
Oh, yeah.
Jacob Dylan, is it?
Yeah.
They did a version for the soundtrack to Godzilla, which also had the Puff Daddy "Come With Me" Led Zeppelin crossover on it. I recall. Then there was a version by Aphex Twin. Did a right? Get this right. Aphex Twin did a remixed version of Bowie's original vocal onto Philip Glass's adaptation. So there's a Philip Glass version from the Hero Symphony, which then Aphex Twin remixed with the original Bowie track. I've never heard that,
and I've never heard it. I mean, I quite like Aphex Twin, so I will have to.
Then there was right. Oh, I mean, it gets worse. Peter Gabriel did a version.
Okay.
A stripped down version for his album Scratch My Back. The finalists of X Factor released a version of Heroes for the Help for Heroes charity in 2010. It reached #1 in the UK singles chart. Can you? That sounds awful. That really does sound awful.
And of course it reached #1. God's sake.
Nicholas Pegg writes that it introduced a new generation of David Bowie by subjecting one of the greatest songs to the anodyne arrangements, Eurovision key changes, and sub-Mariah Carey karaoke yodeling, which are the core ingredients of the X Factor's ongoing mission to eradicate real music from planet Earth. I love Nicholas Pegg now. I love him.
Very good. That's very, very good.
Right, further. Right, my God. Coldplay did a version. Lady Gaga did a version. Prince did a version.
Prince? Not heard that one.
That'd be interesting to listen to it.
Coldplay, by the way, was Brian Eno produced Coldplay for quite a while as well, so I wonder if that was part of the equation.
Depeche Mode did a version.
Oh.
And Adrian Belew and Robert Fripp did a version as King Crimson in 2000.
Wow. I don't know that one either.
Motorhead released a version of it in
Somebody in the chat
2017.
said Motorhead, and I was wondering if they were just joking. God.
Yeah, it was one of
Someone said Bonnie Tyler. I hope she didn't.
It was one of the last songs recorded by Lemmy before his death. So
wow, didn't know that. So it wasn't a joke.
I mean, it might be a deeper soul for another day, but I might listen to every version of Heroes and decide which is the worst, which is the worst, and which is the best.
Which is the worst? We can do it on Odyssey, so we can actually play them.
Have you listened to the German version by Bowie? I
Yes,
remember having that on
the... which I can't remember what it. I can't remember the word hero.
Helden, is it Helden?
Helden. Yeah, doesn't work quite as well.
So anyway, that's Heroes. There was a bit more here in terms of Heroes flair. So that was the first thing. The second thing to mention, I'm trying to remember what it was now. Hold on a minute. It was used in the 2012 Olympics as well. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, of course it was. Oh, God.
Yeah, so it really has entered the kind of, mainstream pop lexicon
in the worst way. In the worst way.
I mean, what a towering shame. Oh my God. I'm just reading more of these cover versions. The song was performed by the Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy.
Charles Kennedy.
In the 2002 edition of BBC One's Johnny Vaughan Tonight. A longtime Bowie fan, Kennedy told Mojo in 2000 that he had watched David's Glastonbury performance from the side stage. So there we go.
I have a strange fondness for poor departed Charles Kennedy. So yeah, I can imagine it was well lubricated with.
It was performed by Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor in Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge.
Oh, God, Coogan, it was, yes. Oh.
Steve Coogan led the cast in a mass knees up to Bowie's original recording as the credits roll on John Dugan's comedy The Parole Officer.
No idea.
So there we go. So there are even versions by Steve Coogan and Nicole Kidman out there. And by Charles Kennedy. So
vaguely, and Charles Kennedy, I'd love to see that one. Oh.
So anyway, there we go. I can't remember the other bit of flair. It's just going to pass my mind now. We might as well go on to Sons of the Silent Age.
Yes, which is another one of these songs that sounds like it came from a different Bowie era.
Yeah, but he's got the kind of Mockney stylings on there, doesn't he? So it's slightly more South Londony on that song. In his accent is what it's like. There are shades of his Anthony Newdy voice, I guess, on there.
Right. Yeah, and I think people have said that it's sort of like the Bewley Brothers. It just sounds of like hunky dory sort of era. And this was the only song that was written prior to the session. Like this was actually written as a song. This was not made up on the spot. But it's something about Sons of the stand on platform, blank looks and notebooks, sit in the back rows of city limits, laying in bed, coming and going on easy terms. It just has that feel of hunky dory, that era.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it's one of his least performed live songs as well. He didn't do it live in performance very often. He played it on 1987's Glass Spider tour, but didn't ever play it again after that. So I don't know if he did it on, because there was a tour of this, which was released as Stage, right?
A Stage, which has a wrestling connection, because I think it was filmed at Philly Spectrum Stage.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
I know he played Madison Square Garden during that. During that as well.
It was called Isolar 2. So it was so Isolar 1 was the Thin White Duke, was Station to Station, and then Isolar 2 was Low and Heroes, and I don't know if Lodger was included in that tour as well, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying. I mean, it's mostly Low, and it's mostly songs from Station to Station, Low, Heroes, and Ziggy, from what I can tell.
Okay, I think it was actually before that tour was prior to the production of Lodger. So yeah, it was between Heroes and Lodger that he did that.
But I'm looking at the track listings, and Sons from a Silent Age is not played on that.
No, it's the Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, David Bowie's catalogue.
Yeah, strange. Okay, and then we get to another amazing mental vocal performance, which is Blackout, which really struck me when I was listening to it earlier on, because it's just, again, completely out there. Especially verse 2, get me to the doctors, I've been told. Someone's back in town, the chips are down. I just cut out and black out. I'm under Japanese influence and my honour's at stake. The weather's grim, ice on the cages. Me, I'm Robin Hood and I puff on my cigarette. Panthers are steaming, stalking, screaming.
and of course, people who haven't heard the record, it isn't delivered in the way that AA did it. It's I'm under Japanese influence and my honour's at stake.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even appropriate.
It's shouted. It is shouted. This song is actually quite harrowing. Again, I mean, thinking of the narrative of these records being a sort of rehab. I mean, this song is, I've been in this situation. Basically, yeah, get me to the doctor, get me off the streets, get me on my feet, get some direction, protection. I mean, this is someone in the midst of it.
Yeah. Yes, typical of the darkly exhilarating sonic schizophrenia of the Heroes album, which is quite a good description. Blackout would work perfectly well as a straightforward rock and roll song. The basic riff is not dissimilar to Suffragette City, but as it is one of the more left field noises even on Heroes. Swathes of squealing synthesizers are punctured by crazed percussion breaks and spliced loops of background noise, topped off by the vocal Bowie histrionics, for which the title track is so noted. Yeah, histrionics is not a bad descriptor of Bowie's vocals on this album.
No, not a bad descriptor.
Yeah, and it weirdly, there are these tender moments, like I'll kiss you in the rain, I'll kiss you in the rain. Then it's like back to get me to the doctor, and so it does like veer off all over the place, the song. And I kind of like it. I say this is what I like about these albums, is that they're so like unhinged in places, and unlike anything I can think of. But that basically closes the suite of like proper songs, and then we're into V2 Schneider.
Also, strangely enough, for Blackout, I mean, there was a famous power cut in New York City in 1977, which lasted, I want to say it was certainly several days. The Andy Warhol diary begins in 1977. Basically, it's 1970, the end of 76, 77.
Yeah, I think I actually covered that Blackout in my Ashes of Civilization series. There's a whole episode dedicated to New York in 77. Yeah,
the Bronx, which was just torched. So many parts of the Bronx were just torched, and I mean, it was it was a mess. Strangely enough, I experienced another famous blackout in New York in 2002, 3. The power was out for at least 2 days. But that was a much more peaceful one because, of course, everyone was still in kind of post 9/11 mode.
Giuliani's New York, right?
Yes, Giuliani's New York. It was a very different place. I can't. I'm sure we'd be back to 77 if it happened again. But yeah, Bowie said that power cut of 77 was part of the song. But I see it as much more of a personal thing.
But apparently, David denied that the song was about the blackout because he reckons he wrote it in late 76. So,
it seems to. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it would be, the timing would be right. But all right.
Yeah,
so then we go from the.
Apparently, the line "someone's back in town" refers to the fact that Angela Bowie arrived from the airport just in time for the crisis. Okay. Because he had a collapse at the end of the Low sessions in November 76, and so "Get Me to the Doctor" is a direct reference to the fact that he literally collapsed at the end of the
Okay.
low session. So yeah.
Okay,
Um,
that makes much more sense than.
yes. And okay, so yes, V2 Schneider.
Yeah, the schizophrenia of the first half gives way to again another instrumental suite, but very different in character from the instrumentals off of Low.
Do you think it's fair to say it's a bit more kind of upbeat in a strange way?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, David Buckley describes V2 Schneider as a goose-stepping piece of music. I mean, there is something to that, I suppose. The military-style drumming and great guitars. The title of the song is a tribute to Kraftwerk's Florian Schneider.
Oh yes, Florian. Yeah.
So,
but of course, but V2, of course, everyone's going to think of the rocket. So the Germans, the first ballistic missile, as far as I'm aware.
This will sound odd, but the overriding sense I got from listening to side 2, especially after V2, so that you get Sense of Doubt, Moss Garden, and New Coln all in a row.
New Coln, yeah.
But the thing that really stood out to me was that it sounds a bit Japanese. Like it sounds almost like the music that you'd play in a, I don't know, like a Japanese Zen garden or something.
Well, there's a bit of that, and of course that shouted line, "I'm under Japanese influence" from Blackout. I mean, Bowie was a huge, Japanophile, and of course, it makes me think of the opening of Scary Monsters with that shrieking Japanese woman. So, yeah, I think that there's something to that. There's also, I think, throughout Heroes, there's a weird kind of quasi disco thing. Like you can really hear it in certain tracks. I mean, even like Beauty and the Beast and a bit of V2 Schneider, like you could just hear just under the surface. And I think very explicitly then with the closing track of Heroes, there's definitely a disco thing going on. But
The Secret Life of Arabia.
Yeah, it was a bizarre song.
Yeah, what is that about, The Secret Life of Arabia?
The Secret Life of Arabia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly. I guess we can just skip to that one for a moment. To me, it's very much sort of mediated by a film. I was running at the speed of life through morning's thoughts and fantasies. And I saw your eyes at the crossfades, which of course refers to a crossfade in the film. And then again, you must see the movie, The Sand in My Eyes, I Walked Through a Desert Song when the heroine died.
So
there's a bit
David Lean movie or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some sort of David Lean of the soul. There's that sort of, sort of Orientalism showing through there, which also comes out in Neukölln. I'm going to get flack from my German friend, my pronunciation, but Neukölln, which was, as I said, the area of Berlin where all the Turks moved. And apparently that was the sort of inspiration for that song as well. It was quite literally referencing the kind of quote mistreatment of the Turks.
Do you think that this is signaling now where Lodger's going to go? Because Lodger's kind of like
world music
in a way.
Yeah, world music on steroids. Yeah, I think you can see, you can sense the presage of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So unless we have anything else to say about Heroes, we should move swiftly to the final part of the trilogy, Lodger, that was not actually recorded in Berlin, right?
No, it was recorded at Mountain Studios in Switzerland, where Bowie did a lot of recording in the 80s. I think it's in Montreux. I'm not sure, but Yeah, and then it was, I think, mixed at a place called the Record Plant in New York, which is part of the problem with this record, which we'll come to.
Yeah, he actually it was midway through a 4-month break in the stage tour in September 1978. Bowie took his turn to Montreux to begin work on a studio album with Brian Eno and Tony Visconti. Although Lodger is now widely referred to as the third album in Bowie's Berlin trilogy, it was in fact recorded in Switzerland and in New York, which had become Bowie's twin homes by the time it was released. So, yeah, now on this album, Eno had a lot more, let's just say, direct kind of, famously gets them to swap instruments and
Oh yeah,
um,
there's a lot of. I mean, there was, as I said, Eno's influence grew with each of these records. Low, it was fairly limited. Heroes, it was much more extensive, and they began using the elite strategies, which I got right here. I've got. You can buy. You can still buy it. You can buy your own deck of Eno's elite strategies. So,
although Peg claims that Eno's presence is less keenly felt on Lodger than on the previous two albums, and he neither co-wrote nor played on 4 of the 10 tracks. Adrian Belew believes that Bowie's working relationship with Eno was winding down.
yeah,
But
uh,
but
I think
despite that, his you see, according to the thing, he seems to have a lot more stuff to do on this album, despite these claims. So yeah.
Well, I think he has more. There are more Eno. I mean, he's got the most credited tracks. I think he's credited. He's co-writer for like 4 or 5 of the tracks, which is more than any of the other records. And I can hear Eno all over this, all over Lodger, in a certain way. But I would say that his most meaningful contribution was Heroes. I think it's absolutely right to say that the collaboration was broken down, and it's not like they had any kind of falling out. But I think Eno has said many times that the spark was gone, and this album was really a struggle because it was not the inspiration. I mean, strangely enough, I forgot to mention on Heroes, Visconti said that it was the last record that he ever worked on that he felt like he was really making art. Where that he felt like he was really innovating anything, which is sad, of course, because Visconti's still with us. But in a way, I sort of understand. And Lodger was not this sort of brilliant, this outpouring of brilliance in the way that Heroes and Low certainly were. But yeah, it's hard to say. It's difficult to say. I don't know how long Eno was there. Probably 2 weeks again, but he gets more credit. So I'm going to assume that he had the most to do with this record.
You see, just despite that, though, I kind of love Lodger.
I do as well. I've always loved Lodger. Yeah.
And I don't know. I just find it. It's kind of, I don't know. I find it. It's just an enjoyable record. It's enjoyable, and it's also less like, again, in its own way, completely insane.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah. And it's also, of course, more. It's more of a conventional record. I mean, there are songs on it.
Yeah, the songs. Yeah.
I've got in that folder I've got various. If you've ever seen the full cover of Lodger, it's completely mental as well. There you go. I can't remember who the photographer was that did this spread, but Bowie. I mean, they did all sorts of makeup effects, and they also attached like nylon threads to like pull his face so that it looked weird and distorted. And Bowie, I spent a long time trying to find a high resolution version of this photograph, and then I read that Bowie insisted that he use the lowest resolution camera that he could, which is a Polaroid SX70. So there is no high res version of this. It's grainy and blurry because the original is grainy and blurry. So it's a very strange image. Also, apparently, the bandage on his hand is real. He had burned himself badly with coffee in the morning that they did the photo shoots.
Peg contradicting himself here, by the way. He says Tony Visconti recalls that Brian Eno was given far more leeway during the Lodger sessions than previously. The first two, Low and Heroes, were a delicate balance, but on this one, Brian was very much in control. So, I mean, okay, the ship may have been winding down, but he was given more power.
Yeah, I think there's probably some truth to that. As I said, I just being a big admirer of Eno, I hear a lot of his things, a lot of his manipulations on this.
But Buckley claims by early 1979, Bowie was being out-Bowied by Gary Newman, a new wave rocker turned robotic and androgyne, with a head full of Bowie, whose band Tubeway Army hit number one in the UK with Our Friends Electric and
wonderful song.
John Fox era Ultravox. Another Bowie-esque single, Cars, also reached the UK top spot. In the absence of a big UK hit for Bowie in over 2 years, it looks as if his natural constituency of the emotionally dispossessed had found a new, if not exactly unfamiliar icon. Newman had justifiably gone on to become a cult, an artist of great repute, but at that time, the hardcore Bowie fans looked on, dispirited and unaccepting, at a man considered to be nothing more than a Bowie copyist. The Lodger album, which hit the shops just as Newman Mania was breaking out, was a demanding affair, its working titles including Planned Accidents and Despite Straight Lines. So there we go. And then Peg has got on this not that much actually. A quote from Mel Lieberman saying it would be fair to call it Bowie's Sgt. Pepper, a concept album that portrays the Lodger as a homeless wanderer, shunned and victimized by life's pressures and technology. But I don't know why this album is run down so much, because once we get onto the tracks, which we'll get onto in a second, I think there are loads of amazing songs and amazing moments on this album.
So, I agree.
None more so than the opener, which is the absolutely mental, fantastic voyage.
Yes.
Which I mean, I don't have a very good voice, in case anybody's noticed, but it's just like, when he goes for it, he really goes for it.
He really goes for it. I mean, this song is like I think I mentioned it in prior stream. I mean, this is just peak musical theater. I don't know. I mean, I'm not warmed up, so I certainly can't even attempt it. But as we'll never say anything nice again, will we? And then he just goes on and on and on and on. He holds that note for a very long time. It's an incredible performance. I mean, his vocal performance on this record in general is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said previously that I think Bowie's peak as a vocalist is on Lodger and on Scary Monsters, which we'll do next time. I think he's in command of his full vocal range around this time, where he's not quite so old that he can't hit the high notes anymore. Which I think later on, when we get to late Bowie, I don't think he can go high anymore. It's all low stuff.
Yeah.
But he's got that kind of deep timbre to his voice as well, which he, arguably he's had since Diamond Dogs, which we talked about before. And Fantastic Voyage for me is probably in his top 3 vocal performances.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you see what I love about the album is that we go from Fantastic Voyage to the absolutely mental African Night Flight.
Yeah.
Which has got like kind of proto rap, and I mean, it's got You know, I mean, can you do African night flight one time?
Yeah.
More men
All
fall
men fell
in
and hullabaloo
Hullabaloo
men.
men.
Yeah.
But then it's got the refrain. Ah, Santi Habari Habari.
Bara, na bana, na bana, na.
It's I mean, it is. It really is. Just, just insane.
And the noises. I mean, the Brian Eno noises on this song. Which one of them literally in the liner notes is called. It says Brian Eno gives. Let's see if I can find it. It's so funny. Yeah, Brian Eno, ambient drone, prepared piano, and cricket menace. Cricket menace is his listing for African Night Flight, and if you listen to the track, you'll know the noise. I don't know what that noise
Yeah,
is.
I've actually got the lyrics up here, and it has a moment where it just says brackets cricket menace.
It is a
So,
horrible noise. But yeah, and there the lyric, yeah, is half I'm getting in the mood for a Mombasa night flight, pushing my luck, going to fly like a mad thing. Bear strip takeoff, skimming over rhino, born in slumber, less than peace, struggle with a child who's screaming, dreaming. Apparently, this song was inspired by him taking Duncan Jones, his son, Zowie, otherwise known as, to Africa for a trip. So, uh,
interestingly, Buckley has different flair for this. He
oh,
says the song deals with some German fighter pilots Bowie had met in the bars of Mombasa, who felt so culturally alienated that they couldn't return home.
okay, I never heard that one.
I never heard
I
that either. Some
no,
deep.
it's very deep.
We promised deep lore. I mean, you know,
God's
um,
sake.
the very
I
fact.
think the other weird thing about Lodger is it really is. I like this idea that that the whole that the character of this is an eternal lodger. It is someone without a home. I've been all over the world. I've left every place. And
Yeah.
so many of these songs are this weird kind of, as I said, this weird kind of mental world music.
Yeah, I mean, when we say world music, this isn't fucking like Paul Simon's Graceland
No,
or something. It's
no, it's not Paul Simon and a bunch of Africans. It's not Philip
with
Glass
Lady
and
Smith with Black Mambazo in the background, you know. Oh, that is such wank, you know.
God's
Doesn't
sake.
Paul McCartney have a couple of songs like that as well? They all had a
I
crack at it.
yeah, most of them did. Most of them had it. Most of them dipped into that. God's sake.
Oh, just to back you up, D, Peg does have the stuff. It says in February 1978, Bowie went on safari to Kenya with his 6-year-old son Joe. His meeting with the Maasai tribespeople sparked an immediate interest in the music of the subcontinent. And as he told an American interviewer shortly afterwards, I intend going back. I haven't finished there. I wanted to understand what I was seeing and what I was dealing with before I was presumptuous enough to start recording anything. In Mombasa, Bowie was fascinated to meet maverick German fighter pilots who drank away their hours in local bars and felt unable to return to their fatherland. You've got a good idea why they are there in the first place, he said, but they live strange lives, flying about in their Cessnas over the bushland, doing all kinds of strange things. They're very mysterious characters, permanently plastered, and always talking about when they're going to leave. The song came about because I was wondering exactly what they were doing there and why they flew around. I mean, presumably those German fighter pilots were World War II vets, were they? What the? I mean, did
I
Germans even
suppose
have
they
an air
would have
force in the 70s?
77. I don't know. I really don't know. Uh, yeah, I don't know what the story would have been there. Maybe Panama Hat knows about that. I don't know.
That is odd, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, we then go to move on to talk
Move
about
on.
leaving.
Which I got a bit of flair for this. Move on. Oh, the structure of the song is all the young dudes played in reverse. So
Wow, I didn't know that.
yes, and again, this is a pure Eno thing. from the Oblique Strategies. Play it backwards. So yeah, apparently the structure of this song was based upon playing All the Young Dudes in reverse.
Fascinating. I didn't. Okay. I'll have to try to listen to it again with that in mind, though.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly enough, around the same time, I'm gonna look here.
Maybe it's just a trick of the mind.
Yes, 1978. So the same year he did this. Eno did a record with members of the krautrock group Cluster, called Eno, Mobius, and Redelius. And there's a song on it called Zima Naki, which is Talking Heads backwards. So there's a whole song with backward lyrics on that record. And so I think this was something that was certainly playing with at this time. And it's very funny. I didn't know this until recently, but it's funny that it made it onto Lodger, literally a backward song, turning one of your old songs into a new song by reversing it. So.
Do you think there's a bit of a Spengler-esque essentialism here when he says, Africa is sleepy people, Russia has its horsemen? It's kind of like, this is very much a world where each place has a distinct people, which is, he's doing this. I guess I'll put it a different way. He's doing this trip around the world, but this is still a world where every place is distinct, as opposed to the global mall, which we have now.
The literal homogeneous, yeah. But of course, this is again a person that's displaced. I mean, he is just going from place to place to place, and always observing and never participating. He's not a part of this. I mean, he's not African. He's not going to be the Russian horseman. He's not going to be in old Kyoto. He's never going to be a part of all these things. So it
was never performed live, by the way. Move on.
Not surprising. Sometimes I feel that he sings it in a very odd way as well.
It's described by Peg as a pseudo Elvis baritone.
Yeah, there's a weird. I always think of it also as a cowboy. It has a kind of like fake cowboy thing. Gotta feel like I'm gonna move on. It's got this odd.
Maybe a hint to Johnny Cash even.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. According to Buckley, he feels that it's Lodger's finest track. So,
really, I don't agree with that. No, in fact, it's one of my less favorite tracks on the album.
Well, we can move on to my least favorite track on the album, which is
would it be Yestassin?
Yestassin, yes. Which as
we
discussed, was actually released as a single somewhere. Where was Yestassin released? Let me just remind myself of that.
Where was it released as a single?
I don't like this. This is the one note on the album I'm not that keen on.
I kind of like it.
It's Turkish for long life, and it's actually a sequel to Nuklon, about the Turkish sector in Berlin. We came from the farmlands to live in the city. Yeah, we want to fight, but I don't want to leave. Don't say nothing's wrong, because I got a love and she's afeared.
I'm not a moody guy. I don't know. I quite like the chorus of this, if you call it that.
It was released as a single in Turkey and in the Netherlands. Believe it or not.
Of course it was. Oh dear.
Yeah, because why not? Why not?
Why not? Yeah.
I don't know if it was a hit in Turkey, or
was it a hit in Turkey?
I doubt it. I doubt it very much.
No.
I'm not sure how popular Bowie is in the Islamic world, to be honest. Then again, if you've ever been to the Islamic world, their music is probably the gayest music in the entire world because it's all
not
like,
just the music, mate.
it's probably the most like the shittest Europop you've ever heard, but kind of like Easternified in a way.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's something about, especially Turkey. If you've ever been there, the plucked eyebrows and the
Oh, I know. Oh, come on! I just picture the late '90s, a 6'3" red-headed man wearing kaftan walking around Istanbul. I mean, ooh, the stories I could tell.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, the Turks have always been a bit that way. The Ottomans and the. Anyway,
there's not a man on my Ottoman. There hasn't been one for weeks. There's not a man on my Ottoman. He went off to fight the Greeks. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I was shocked. I think it was, I read it in Evola of all places, where he talked about institutionalized bombing essentially in the Ottoman army, where there was a kind of it was like, if your superior wanted to sleep with you, you had to do it, basically.
Yep.
And
unfortunately, there was certainly British troops that experienced that against their will. Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah. All right. So, of course, being a Persian, the Turk is the immortal enemy of mine. But,
of course. I mean, for all things Turkic, I would defer to Semigog, who I thought was a Turk, but then I was disabused of that nation very quickly.
No, I mean, can you imagine him in Turkey? He's like a bloody blonde elf walking around.
Well, he lived there for years. Yeah. He speaks Turkish. It's very odd. But as I said,
I mean, I have to say that if you read the history of Turkey, as is so often the case, much of that kind of decadence and degeneracy snuck into the culture through the Persian back door, unfortunately. So, despite what I just said, yeah, you have to watch that influence. It didn't just get into the Greek system; it got into the Ottoman system as well.
I'd watch out for that Persian back door if I were you.
I don't know. I mean, I've said it before. It wasn't just one empire. They fell. It was about like 6 or 7. All the same. The kind of the decadence and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
3,000 years of it now. Anyway, which is interesting to think about. If you then think, well, hardcore Islam is actually after this point. You think of the Islamic world as being behind us, right? But like when you realize they had feminism in the 10th century, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like exactly, maybe they're further on in the cycle than we are.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, listening to if you listen to any of those Apostolic Majesty streams about the Ottoman Turks, I mean, the 17th century, they're just 18th century, they're being dominated by these sort of clades of women and eunuchs and just horrible situations.
Can I just say, Vingle has won the chat today with Wham Bam Ottoman.
Very good.
Oh man. Anyway, we move on to Red Sails now.
Red Sails. Yeah.
Which is basically says, here we took a German new music feel. This is Bowie. I put it the idea of a contemporary English mercenary come swashbuckling Errol Flynn and put him in the China Sea. We have a lovely cross-reference of cultures. Honestly, don't know what it's about, Bowie. So.
I don't know. I don't know what it's about either. It does have a weird sort of Chinesey, melodic progression.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't, and without sounding like, I don't want to sound like a kind of left-wing academic here, but there is an Orientalism on this album. It's like Arabian Nights. It's like kind of it's the Orientalism of Sinbad or something.
Yeah.
And this is the episode which happens to be in China now. But it's like the China of Marco Polo or something. It's not like
Edward Said is going to rise from the grave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's ever been a post-colonial reading of Lodger.
A post-colonial reading. Well,
Yeah.
I think that sort of built into it a bit.
There is this amazing outro to Red Sails. We're going to sail to the hinterland. The hinterland. It's far, far, far away. Far, far, far. Da da da.
Yeah,
um. So
the hinterland, the
the
hinterland. Yeah,
hinterland. Yeah, we're going to
very,
sail to the hinterland.
very on track.
So
Then,
yeah, okay. So now we're going to hit a suite of 1, 2, 3 singles in a row, big hitters in a row. I am a DJ.
and what a play! Yeah. So, well, one thing that strikes me first off about this song is if you listen to it, certainly especially the beginning of it, the way he sings it, he is literally imitating David Byrne from the Talking Heads. I'm
Yes.
up, lost my job, and
Yeah.
incredibly ill. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's doing
it's
that.
definitely Talking Heads. Bowie is
Yeah, he's
Talking Heads.
doing
Yeah.
that David Byrne delivery. It's also quite a dark song. I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, most of the lyrics: "I am a DJ. I am what I play. Can't turn around. No, can't turn around." It's someone trapped in this infinite loop, this infinite performative loop. One more weekend of lights and evening faces, fast food, living nostalgia, humble pie or bitter fruit. I am a DJ. I am what I play. Can't turn around. No, can't turn around. There's just to me, there's something quite menacing about this song.
Yeah. Bowie wasn't. So this is Peg. Bowie was not alone. Hold on. DJ is Bowie's wry investigation of the vicarious celebrity and unreal lifestyle of that rising late 1970s icon, the disc jockey. This is
Mm.
somewhat cynical, but it's my natural response to disco, Bowie said. The DJ is the one who is having ulcers now, not the executives, because if you do the unthinkable thing of putting a record on in a disco, not in time, that's it. If you have 30 seconds silence, your whole career is over. Bowie was not alone in his distaste for the cult of the DJ. I love the video, by the way, while we're on the subject. In
Oh
October
yeah.
1978, Elvis Costello's bitter diatribe, Radio, Radio,
Mm.
radio is in the hands of such a lot of fools trying to anesthetize the way you feel, led to an all-out war with when Tony Blackburn dismissed Costello on air as a silly little man. When Blackburn found himself introducing the song live on the following week's Top of the
Oh,
Pops, Costello changed the line "such a lot of fools" to "silly little men," and shook a fist at the off-screen presenter. My God, Costello Tony Blackburn feud.
amazing. Never
Yeah,
heard of that.
DJ is less confrontational, but just as dramatic, featuring Bowie in top histrionic form. You think this is easy realism? Over a wonderfully queasy synthesizer backing and a demented violin from Simon House. Andrew Bellow's squealing guitar part is also of note, composited from various takes so that, as Bellow explains in Strange Fascination, it goes through a whole mismatch of different guitar sounds, almost like you're changing the channel on the radio, and each channel has a different guitar solo on it. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what. But so I think when so yeah, we've got to mention with Lodger, we swapped out Robert Fripp for Adrian Belew, who was another later member of King Crimson, and also omnipresent on a lot of records and a lot of projects that I like. But yeah, I think that was literally the instruction that Bowie gave him for this. You know, play like you're switching through channels and listening to different solos, and yeah, and that weird processed violin in this song. And the video, yeah, people should watch that. Is with just Bowie wandering around Earl's Court with just a bunch of people, and they literally just walk out with a camera, with camera and a light, and just, he's like hugging black men, and singing the
Yeah,
song.
so
It's very
bizarre.
odd. It's very odd video.
Yeah,
He's like, oh wait, that's David Bowie. We'll just follow him. Yeah.
I like his hair around that time. He's got like brown hair suddenly.
Yeah, I
Right.
think this period is one of my favorite looks. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. All the videos from this album are cool. All the singles from this album are
Yeah,
cool.
they're all good. They're all good. And he looks very good in all as well.
Yeah, he looks like he's kind of, healthy again at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Peg describes DJ as fantastically uncommercial, and Buckley says that it peaked at 29 in the UK charts. Yes, it proved too tangled structurally for the singles charts. So there we go. Which surprised. I always thought it's kind of a decent single. It's quite catchy, but
Yeah,
I guess I'm weird.
well, I think a lot of these songs are quite catchy. I don't know.
And then we get to another single which I quite like called "Look Back in Anger," which has got another cool video where he's painting.
Yeah, he's a painter in a garret. Yeah, you know who I am, he said. It's got quite a dramatic vocal presentation.
Yeah, the full David Bowie voice on here that we were talking about before, the definitive Bowie voice, I would say, is
"Look back in anger,
driven
by the night till you come." Very good. So this is a favorite song from the record and a wonderful video.
And then I mean, if you want to say anything else about "Look Back in Anger," I don't know if it's a direct reference to John Osborne. Oh, by the way, we talked about John Osborne before. The playwright.
Yep.
I have discovered that Face-to-Face series has an episode with John Osborne on it, which I really want to watch, but I can't. It's not on YouTube and it's not on the BBC archives. But I'd love to track down that, because I bet he was a great interview, because he's another kind of a sea brick, and he's got no time for fools. And that BBC interviewer on Face-to-Face is quite intrusive in a way. Like in his questioning, like he kind of goes to strange places, and there's a few times where war is like. There's a great one with Carl Jung of all people on there as well.
Wow,
it's a fantastic. It really is fascinating.
I've seen a number of those. Never saw that one. Yeah. He does have a slightly needling quality.
Yeah, I looked into him, and that guy Jonathan Freeman was a former politician, so he's not a journalist by trade. He's a politician by trade, so that's why he's got a slightly impertinent interviewing style,
right? Which I think helps. I mean, it certainly keeps them pricked up a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, so Peg says there is no connection with John Osborne's 1956 kitchen sink drama. Instead, the song concerns itself with sinister intimations of mortality, as a fatalistic Bowie is visited down by a down-at-heel angel of death, who coughed and shook his crumpled wings, closed his eyes, and moved his lips. It's time we should be
going away.
David Mallett's superb video, inspired by the picture of Dorian Gray, casts Bowie as a bohemian painter in an attic studio whose self-portrait has the reverse effect of Dorian's. Bowie finds the skin of his own face beginning to corrupt and melt. Despite the video, Look Back in Anger failed to make any chart impact at all in America, where it was released in preference to Boys Keep Swinging. It was
America's never going to get that. It's a wonderful song. I don't know.
Yeah, I just love the image of the angel unfurling its wings. It's just so epic, it's epic. And then, so I don't know what people talk about. This is an amazing album.
Yeah,
I mean, every single track we're talking about, apart from The Assassin, and even The Assassin had interesting stuff about it, has been awesome. We're 8 tracks in now, and they're all good.
Yeah.
And the next one was another single. Boys Keep Swinging.
The next one, I love this song for various reasons.
When you're a boy, you can wear a uniform, D. When you're a boy, the boys check you out.
It's so good. And this has one of the best videos of all. I'm not going to give anything away, but the video for this is amazing. Do you know it?
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
And also, he is just that part where he performs that when you're a boy, you can wear a uniform. Just the amazing poses that he does. He really looks good during that.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a cool. I don't know why the the dissident right don't acquire this as a kind of ironic anthem. Boys keep swinging. It could be good for thirsty Diego and friends.
Thirsty Benito.
Yeah, thirsty Benito. Sorry.
Oh, heaven love ya. Life is a pop of the cherry.
Now, Bowie claims that he wasn't trying to champion boys or girls or anything else on this thing. That he was just having fun or whatever. But this was actually the song, believe it or not, D, where the band swapped instruments.
Oh, is this the one? Okay,
this
yeah.
is the song.
Which was a Brian. I don't know. I think it sounds perfectly fine. Although I do think that they did re-record it because I think Bowie was unhappy with the bass part, which again may have had something to do with that instrument swap thing. But
yeah, it's mentioned that Carlos Alomar just wasn't happy. Period with the whole swapping thing.
Well, Carlos Alomar, I should mention, didn't really like Brian Eno. In fact, I think he literally called it avant-garde bullshit.
Right. Okay.
So, but I do think that having that someone of his abilities who was resistant to the process was also part of the process. I mean, I think that made it even better. I think that tension between one of the most valuable members of one of the most valuable contributors of sound in this record. I think having him a kind of against the whole process probably made it even better. I think that having a squeaky wheel sometimes actually works to your advantage.
There's quite a lot of stuff in the lore about Bowie appearing on the Kenny Everett show, doing this song.
Was Bowie on the Kenny Everett show?
Yeah, to promote Boys Keep Swinging.
Oh,
it says the show was renowned in industry circles for Everett's outrageous experiments with techniques like chroma-key and Quantel, as well as for his anarchically disrespectful behavior towards the big-name guests he invariably attracted. On this occasion, Everett's Angry of Mayfair character, an apologetic bowler-hatted city gent whose rear view revealed a penchant for women's lingerie, chased the hapless Bowie around the studio yelling, "Look at you, you lily-livered mincer. I was in the war, but I didn't see you there. I fought for people like you, and I never got one." I have to see that.
Oh,
that amazing.
Someone says it's on YouTube, so I've got I've never seen it.
I can't play it, obviously, but
no.
I have to watch that after
Kenny. I mean, if the Americans have never heard of Kenny, I mean, if you ever get a chance to watch some of those Kenny Everett shows, there's the sort of Doctor Who one with Carla, the gum chewing. Yeah, it's amazing.
But Boys Keep Swinging actually did chart. It reached number 7, which was his biggest hits in Sound and Vision.
Wow.
But the gender bending video and the dodgy lyric proved too much for the poor souls at RCA America, who decided against a US release, an exact repeat of John I'm Only Dancing 7 years earlier. Considering the transatlantic enormity of the Village People and their smash hit YMCA only a few weeks earlier, it seems almost incredible. So there we go.
David Mallet, yeah.
And then
also I should mention that around this time, and this has pertinence to our relationship, AA, because Bowie appeared on Saturday Night Live as a musical guest, and his backup singers were Joey Arias, who is a transvestite, and Klaus Nomi, who is a space alien.
Yeah, the kind of Cold Song fame and various other, yes.
And our first conversation, AA, on Twitter was talking about Nomi.
Klaus Nomi.
Yeah, that was literally the first time we ever interacted.
Yeah, well, I'm one of only about 50 people in the world who knows who he is. So you know,
Yeah.
and you're one of the other ones. So
Yeah,
there we
one
go.
of the other ones. Well, I think, and I think I told you that. Did you know that Kaisnomi was Bowie's backup? And I don't think you had seen those at that point. But if they used to be on YouTube. I don't know. I'm sure you can find them somewhere online. But if you look up, Bowie performs "Boys Keep Swinging" on Saturday Night Live with a little Bowie marionette, who at the very end of the song he exposes its penis.
Gosh.
It's really something. He also does "The Man Who Sold the World," in which he has to be carried out. Because he's wearing actually one of Nomi's plastic costumes, or a costume that was based on one of those, and Joey Arias and Nomi have to carry him out and sit him in front of the microphone.
Mate, I have to watch that performance. I haven't the second. I think I've seen The Boys Keep Swinging, but I haven't seen the Man Who Sold the World. Performance.
It's amazing, and I think Alomar is there. I mean, I think it's the whole lineup from around the time of Lodger. I don't know if Adrian Belew is there, but it's glorious. And I mean, you know, it's just calculated to shock American sensibilities at the time, I think.
So we then go from Boys Keep Swinging to a tale of domestic abuse and wife beating on repetition.
Which this is a track I tend to skip. I don't really like this song. I mean, it's certainly one of Bowie's darkest lyrical.
I actually feel like this is a Lou Reed type song. Lou Reed has a few of these songs. Carolyn Says. There's one called "The Gun," by Reed, which is kind of along these lines. But this is dark. You know, when he says, "Don't hit her," and then there's just the beat of the drum. You know, implicating that she's getting a pasting here. Dark, just fucking dark. I don't know, like what the Buckley, who is, I have noticed, quite dark himself, says this is an undervalued song and one of Bowie's very best. So,
of course, I don't like it. I don't like it because it's just a bit too much for me. It's also a little bit. I'm not saying that this was the case, but it seems like almost like it could be an issue song. You know, those kind of songs that.
Yes.
You know, like Jeremy from Pearl Jam, just these songs that are sort of written to highlight an issue.
Social issues, yes.
Yeah, and so I don't think that this falls into that category because it's a little too ambiguous. But I tend to skip it.
I'm reading about to see if there's really not much on this. Not much explanation of why he wrote the song, what it's about. I mean, it's pretty straightforward what it's about, but it doesn't.
What was that early 90s? What's that song? Oh, Luca. My name is Luca. I live on the second floor. I live upstairs from you. Yeah, it's one of those, I don't know, domestic violence songs. They seem a little issue-y to me.
It just has no explanation whatsoever from Bowie. He did bring it back out in 1997 for Changes Now Bowie.
Ooh.
He says, I wanted to try it acoustically because it was so much an electronic piece of work on the album. I just wanted to see what it was made of just as a song when it was really stripped down. And it's interesting to see that something really so minimal works quite so well as a straightforward rendition. So he's just talking about it technically as opposed to. So there we go. And then
there we go.
I would say of the tracks on Lodger, it's not one of my favorites either. Neither is Red Money, to be honest. But when the rest of the album is as strong as it has been, I don't really care that these ones aren't aren't quite as good. Carlos Alomar has a co-writing credit on Red Money. and
Yeah.
it's a straight retread of Sister Midnight by Iggy Pop.
Yes, very much so. It's yeah, and Adrian Belew I think is quite present on this song as well. I mean, it's got a catchy kind of refrain, you know. What is it? What is it about there? Project cancelled, tumbling tentacle, red money from here for. Oh, like predicting the failure of this record. I don't know.
This song, I think, is about responsibility. Red boxes keep cropping up in my paintings, and they represent responsibility. Accordingly, red money ends up with a proposition. Such responsibility, it's up to you and me. So, whenever you see a red box in Bowie or red, it's about taking responsibility for something.
Responsibility, eh? Okay.
According to Bowie himself, that is.
Yeah. Who was known to occasionally stretch the truth, make up a good story.
Project cancelled, sang Bowie, drawing a line under the Eno collaboration. So there we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Project cancel right there in the chorus.
Yeah.
Red money. Time to take responsibility. What I'm going to do now, when we turn to the 80s, I'm going to sell out like nobody's ever sold out before and make a fuckload of money. That's amazing.
I am sick of making these fucking avant-garde records with Brian Eno sitting there with his bald head and his fucking oblique strategies cards. I'm going to blow all that shit away, and I'm just going to make a lot of money.
Fuck all this. I'm going to get in Nile Rodgers. We're going to make the biggest tour the world's ever seen.
Yeah.
So,
and he did.
And that's exactly what happened. So maybe red money is signaling what would come next.
That's what's going to come next. Yeah.
Although we do have the small issue of Scary Monsters, which is a very, as we'll talk about next week, kind of a difficult album to place in his overall. It doesn't really belong to any one era. It's kind of between.
No, it's a very weird record. Very weird.
Yeah, I might listen to. I've never listened to because there was that new box set that came out with the redone Berlin.
Oh, what's it called?
A New Career in a New Town.
A New Career in a New Town. Yeah, which it's absolutely wonderful. So one of the problems with Lodger, which Bowie and Tony Visconti both had, is that they didn't like it. They thought it was mixed very badly. I mean, of course, Visconti mixed it, but due to a combination of factors, one being that they didn't have time, and two that he mixed it in New York, and at the time, the New York studios were nowhere near as advanced as Hansa and the Wall and Mountain and all the other places that they were working in Europe. So there were limitations, and they never liked the sound of the record. And I think that both of them at one time or another attributed the sort of lukewarm reception to this record to the mix, that they thought it was so bad that it really hampered the record. And so in 2013, Tony Visconti just got all the master tapes and just started to remix the whole record, remaster and remix. And apparently in 2015, he had it finished enough that he played it for Bowie. And Bowie was, of course, dying at this point. But Bowie said that he loved it, and he basically gave his blessing to release it. So the mix that on A New Career in a New Town, there is the remastered original mix, and then there's Tony Visconti's new mix, and it's very good. And obviously, if you like this record, you should probably listen to that new mix, because it gives a very different feel to the record. I don't think it's make or break. I think that perhaps they overstated the problem with the original mix, but there's certainly a lot more kind of clarity. There's a lot of sludge that's kind of removed.
I mean, Dee, I don't know if we'll get to this next time, and indeed, I don't even know if you want to be on next time. But there was an album where, I mean, by most accounts, Bowie's worst album is Never Let Me Down, right? From 1987. In that same reissue series that they did, those box sets that came out, they did that with Never Let Me Down as well, and it is quite transformative. By which I mean it turns the album from being unlistenable dog shite to being at least a decent listen, if that makes any sense. So it's interesting that it doesn't really do that for Lodger, but then Lodger was a good record in the first place, so that's probably probably a difference. I also want to listen to that version of Stage that's on there. So I'm going to see if I can do that after we leave, because by all accounts the Stage tour was pretty good. The that 1978 Isolar 2 tour was meant to be quite good. And certainly the performances from Japan that I've seen have been really good. So because there's footage out there that you can watch on YouTube if you'd like.
And you'll certainly enjoy revisiting the Philly Spectrum in a non-wrestling capacity.
Yes, yeah. I mean, maybe Cal Rudman and Gorilla Monsoon were there. Who knows? So yes. Now that we've finished the Berlin trilogy, I think a lot of people would probably rate them in the order they were recorded: Low, Heroes, Lodger. Would you go along with that rating, or would you switch it up a bit?
I would switch it up. I would say Low, Lodger, Heroes. Yeah, I'm less apt to revisit Heroes, other than a couple of tracks which I really like. But I think in general it's slightly less of a piece than Lodger.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, and I would go for the exact same order. And the reason is that I very seldom, if ever, listen to the second side of Heroes, the instrumental side. I just think it's a bit, I mean, I do love those mental opening tracks and Joe Lion and all that stuff, but I don't know. Lodger is just more enjoyable as a record for me. And I just love the videos and the singles and things on Lodger as well. So
no, I would certainly agree.
I don't know if I can. Maybe I'll set a poll. Favorite record. I'll do all three of them, and then I'll do Lodger versus Heroes to see favorite of Berlin trilogy. I'd be like, oh, I'm a Zoomer. Hey, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about.
What's an album?
Heroes. And I saw David Bowie once in Zoolander, let's say. Yeah, right. So we'll get that. I expect Low to win this. Then I'll do like the battle for second place. Let's just see if Low wins first of all. So yeah, while that's going, I'll just read a couple of super chats that have come in. King Cribble says, "You're right, geezer. Just seen a London hipster reading Evola on my way home from work." So, do you know, D? There is now such a thing as a kind of hipster, kind of dissident right scene in both London and in New York, apparently.
Yes. I've had contact with it through Twitter, and I'm not terribly impressed by it, as I'm never impressed by hipsters of any sort. Because
I've been told that we have been discussed by these disgusting circles.
Yes, we have, and I, as I see, I've seen them, and I've seen some of them being not particularly. They just say attacking their sensible allies, and so. But I mean, I don't trust these people, and I never trust these people because, of course, they wear everything as a fashion, and they will cast it off for the next thing as soon as it's no longer giving them the attention. I don't think there's very little ideological consistency to these people, and they should be mostly ignored.
Meep. R. Phillips Geekery. That was a preview of next time where we'll be doing fashion, of course.
Oh, I
R.
just want to
Philip,
do under this screaming Japanese woman. That's
um, okay. R. Phillips Geekery says, "What's a good scar for an Eve to start?" We did that one. Wiggle says, "Do you know much about the Death in June? Boyd Rice, Rose McDowell, Current 93, David Tibet, Neofolk, weird lot." I don't. I'm not familiar with them at all. Who are they? The
no idea. No idea. I mean,
no.
I've heard all the names, but I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so Low won the poll. 50%, 40% to Lodger's 10. But let me now run Heroes versus Lodger. See how many of those low votes Heroes picks up versus Lodger. I mean, for me, they're all 5-star albums, but I often see Lodger given like 4.5 or 4 3/4 and things like that.
Yeah, and of course, keep in mind that many of the risible rock critics hated all these records when they came out. I mean, they all got roundly dismissed by many people.
Yeah, my impression is that they do what they often did, which is that they missed the boat on Low, and so try to overcompensate by them praising on Heroes a lot. They do that a lot in if you
Yeah.
see it all through rock history. So Heroes got a bit more kind of positive notice by most of them, from what I could see. But then the knives were out for Lodger.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
yeah,
but of course, like 40 years later, then they do a reassessment.
Unfortunately, Heroes has trounced Lodger, 75% plus of the votes. Damn it. Well, anyway, you're a fellow Lodger lover, so there we go. Great. All right, so we'll be back tomorrow night for Unpopular Opinions. I don't know who's going to be on yet or what we're going to be talking about, but news happens. The event is later this week. I mean, I suppose we're probably going to be talking about the awful assassination of Daria Dugina.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that story has been much more about how brutally inhuman some of the reaction has been to that. Because apparently, if you say naughty things, that's fair game to have your daughter blown up. That's basically the moral logic of a lot of the stuff.
Or if
Not only
people
for
make up stories about you and your influence, and then everyone with a flag in their profile believes them, and then they laugh when your daughter is murdered. Yeah, I mean, and of course that this is a replay of attitudes during the Iraq War, but worse. I mean, people were not the. I mean, there's a sort of image of the sort of George Bush Republican bloodthirsty, Tony Blair, rah rah, kill the Islamists, but it wasn't nearly as savage and vile as I've seen the
it's been
Ukraine flag.
disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's a lot of bots out there, but I make a habit of going in and checking, and we'll talk about this tomorrow. But I noticed a particular subsection, a very nasty section of the British public, actually, which is the Liverpudlian leftist. There's a particular type of socialist that's a really
vile,
nasty character.
vile people in the first place, but
yeah.
But I mean,
So,
I've seen people in our own circles express some surprising opinions about this, which shocks me. It's as if people haven't learned the lesson of what this is actually all about. It has nothing to do with Russia and has nothing to do with Ukraine, but people pretend that it does still for some reason.
So anyway, yeah, we'll probably be talking about Dugin tomorrow night, unless something big happens between now and then. That's the big story, I would suggest. And maybe we'll take some time to have a look into Black Rock as well, because I don't know. I've learned a few things. I knew Black Rock were powerful, but I had not appreciated quite how powerful until I came across a few things earlier this week. So we'll talk. Have you heard of the Aladdin system?
Black Country Rock. Oh no, Black Rock. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tie it back to Bowie.
Aladdin saying. Well, have you heard of Aladdin?
I've heard Aladdin
yeah.
saying. I have, although strangely enough, when I looked into it after you'd mentioned it, I found that it was a producer of like thermos flasks. There is a company called Aladdin who produces thermos flasks, but yeah, I didn't know anything about this, but I don't understand anything like about finance in that level. So you'll have to tell me, because I don't understand really what BlackRock even does.
Yeah, well, we'll go into that a little bit, because I have come to believe that what we call the regime is literally just BlackRock at this point. In fact, the enormity of it is so horrifying that I had a few moments where I just thought everything we talk about is pointless, because it is remarkable. Anyway, that is tomorrow night. We'll be back for that. I don't know what's coming up. Does anyone have shows later on? Who tends to? I know Woes has his show on Telegram Monday nights. Evelyn often does a show. Pete Quinones often drops a show later. So look out for all of our usual friends. Yes.
I was on Lambda's stream yesterday.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
What were you discussing?
No, sorry, it was Saturday. Was discussing Ecclesiastes from the Bible, so people can go to Lambda's channel, Lambda Bible Studies, and watch the stream of us. It was quite good. And weirdly enough, I think today Lambda's having Guide to Culture on to talk about the Bible.
Yeah, Frody, I mean, I saw that. I mean, if anybody knows anything about Frody, he's not Christian, to say the least. So what he's got to say about Exodus, I mean, I hope it doesn't. I just hope, for Lambda's sake, that doesn't turn into a shit show.
Poor Lambda.
I know.
Shaving off his beard, so he's lost his power.
Like Samson.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know Frody has the very a very hard version of Christianity is proto-liberalism, basically. So
yeah.
Machiavelli Sucks to Go says, did you hear about the Barbarossa Secret book? Nope. I am not aware of the Barbarossa Secret, whatever that is. I will just say, just before we go, remember, promo code Scorcher, 25% off all the courses. The event is later this week, so buy a ticket if you haven't and you're planning on coming. Otherwise, we'll see you for Unpopular Opinions. Now get out.